Chapter 159. The people under the big green tree looked at the young man, who was giggling at the top of the scenery on the edge of the giant rock. They were all touched and smiled silently. Only second brother was still sitting solemnly and meticulously. There was also a gray-haired old scholar who was reading an old book in his hand. It seemed that everything that happened around him had nothing to do with him. The melodious sound of a flute sounded. The man picked up the flute on his knees and played it with a smile. Then came the sound of a three-stringed zither. Seventh sister picked up an embroidery needle as thin as a cow's hair with her fingers and gently stroked it in a mountain wind. The tip of the needle trembled at a high speed and made a clear sound like that of a metal instrument. The strong man raised a heavy iron hammer and smashed it on the ground, making a loud bang. The hammer fell precisely on the point of excitement in the music. The sound of the flute, the zither, the needle, and the hammer mixed together to form a rather ancient song. It spread out from under the green tree and enveloped the cliff of the back peak of the academy. It urged the floating clouds to flow slowly among the cliffs and the pine trees to sway slightly, as if they were welcoming guests. Standing on the boulder, Ning-Kay listened to the ancient song. He looked back at the big tree and saw those men and women with different appearances but gentle smiles. He looked at Chinpipi under the tree and knew that these people were the senior brothers and sisters of the second floor of the academy. They were expressing their welcome to him in this way. He could not help but feel warm in his heart. The warm feeling quickly turned into a burning sensation in his chest and abdomen. He blacked out and fell down. Prince Longqing stood silently on the lawn under the boulder, as if he had not heard the moving ancient song. His young face, which was like a peach blossom in spring, was still perfect. But his hair, which was slightly wet with sweat, was loose and messily draped over his shoulders. He raised his head and said, "Maybe it's a little ridiculous and lacking in demeanor, but I really don't accept it." Unknowingly, second brother stood up in the ancient song and came to the lawn. He looked at Prince Longqing's cheek and the two dim lights in his eyes. He said calmly, "If I were you, I wouldn't accept it either." After a moment of silence, Prince Longqing said, "If you can't see through the choice, who can?" Second brother looked at him and said with a faint pity, "You can't see through the choice. That means there is fear in your nature, whether it is about the choice or something else. Although I don't know what you've seen and experienced, I can roughly guess that Ning-Kay is different from you. He has no fear in his nature, so he doesn't need to erase his heart as hard as you did." Prince Longqing stared at his eyes and asked with strong puzzlement, "Fear is human nature. As long as you are human, you will be afraid. Ning-Kay is also a human. How can there be no fear in his nature?" Second brother was silent for a long time. It seemed that this question was indeed a little confusing. He shook his head and said, "Maybe this is the difference between a small fear and a big fear. Both of you can overcome the instinctive small fear, but when it comes to the big fear between life and death, between day and night, the situation is different." Prince Longqing understood what he meant. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "You mean Ning-Kay has no faith?" Second brother answered, "Maybe so." Prince Longqing was startled, and then he gave a self-deprecating and sad smile. He murmured, "Because my faith is too strong, I lost to a person who puts himself first and has no faith at all. How can I accept this?" After a moment of silence, second brother said, "Maybe Ning-Kay has faith, but the faith is hidden too deep in his heart. The illusion on the stone path can't be stimulated. Maybe even he himself doesn't know what his true faith is." At this time, Chinpipi carried the unconscious Ning-Kay down from the giant rock, panting heavily. With every step he took, the fat on his cheeks would tremble slightly, like the ripples in a lake. He was very clear that Ning-Kay had fainted because his spiritual world had suffered too much today, and his body had been severely exhausted. Moreover, he had succeeded in reaching the top and relaxed too suddenly, so he was not too worried, just like his senior brothers and senior sisters under the big green tree. Prince Longqing looked at Chinpipi's back and listened to the faint voice calling his younger brother to fetch water from under the tree. His pupils slightly shrank as he thought of the person that the hierarch lord and that woman had occasionally mentioned. He asked incredulously, "Is this him?" It seemed that second brother did not want to hide Chinpipi's identity. He nodded and said, "Yes." Prince Longqing looked at the fat lad who was ordered around and thought of the regret and anger of the hierarch lord and that woman in the red dress when they mentioned him. It was difficult for him to adapt to the contrast between the legend and the reality. The lad in the temple who was said by the hierarch lord to be more talented than that person was just an inconspicuous youngest brother on the second floor of the academy. Looking at the scene in front of him, he suddenly found that his experience today was not so gloomy and unacceptable. After a moment of silence, he sighed and said, "A real genius like him should be ordered around by you in the second floor of the academy. At first, I thought that I could shock the academy after climbing up the mountain. Now it seems that I am really stupid and arrogant. A real genius is a genius no matter where he is." Second brother followed his gaze to the tree and said, "Since he is a genius in the temple, he is certainly a genius in the back of the mountain of the academy. Although he is much worse than me, you don't have to be too disappointed. In fact, your performance today is very good. If Ninkei is not more than you, I should be very happy to welcome you in the back of the mountain." Prince Longqing sighed and bowed deeply to second brother. Then he turned around and walked down the mountain. The quietness in the front yard of the academy had long been replaced by a buzzing discussion like that of wild bees. Those high and mighty bigwigs still maintained their aloofness, but the ordinary officials, instructors, and students could no longer suppress the excitement and curiosity in their hearts. They eagerly awaited the final result of the ascent of the second floor, wanting to know who had won. The professor, who was responsible for presiding over the opening ceremony of the second floor of the academy, walked out slowly. The expression on his face was really a little strange. It seemed that he was very gratified and a little shocked. It seemed that he wanted to laugh, but also seemed to be worried about something. Today, few people, including the students of the academy, knew the identity of this professor. But today, this person presided over the whole day of climbing up the mountain. It was obvious that his identity was distinguished. After several inquiries, people finally knew that he was a divine talisman master who hid in the academy and cultivated in seclusion. At this time, seeing him appear in front of the stone steps, they suddenly stopped talking. Looking at the complicated expression on the professor's face, everyone's heart was stirred again. They had a feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. "Huanghe, what are you doing there?" The only person in the field who dared to speak to the professor in this tone, dared to directly call out his name, and even deliberately added the word could only be Tang Hao, the divine talisman master of South Heaven School, Yinsei. Whether in terms of state, seniority, or age, he was above Professor Huanghe. Moreover, he was a little anxious. Seeing this person dawdling, it was inevitable that his tone was a little stiff and impatient. Today, the result of the enrollment of the second floor of the academy has been announced. Professor Huanghe did not want to argue with Yinsei, the famous divine talisman master, so he looked at the crowd on the stone platform and said slowly. Suddenly, Yinsei thought of a possibility. He suddenly stood up and stretched out his hand to stop him. "Don't say it in a hurry." The drama that had been waiting for a day and a night was about to end. Finally, people could know the real appearance of the hero after taking off the silver mask. But it was interrupted by someone again. Even if people on the front yard of the academy were extremely in awe of Yinsei's identity as a divine talisman master, they finally hissed. The law could not punish the masses. No matter how powerful a divine talisman master was, he could not kill all the hundreds of people on the field. Professor Huang, he unceremoniously glared at Yinsei. He thought to himself, "You are the one urging me, but now you are telling me not to say it in a hurry. What are you trying to do?" He asked helplessly, "Why?" Yinsei rushed up the stone steps and said righteously, "The opening of the second floor of the academy is a big event. Although the headmaster of the academy is traveling in other countries and is not in the capital, you can't be so perfunctory. Before announcing the result, shouldn't you first take a bath and change your clothes, burn incense, and worship heaven?" The hissing under the stage suddenly became more violent. Even Princely Peiyin and Liu could not help but look at the old Taoist priest. Listening to the noise under the stage, Yinsei could not help but feel a little feverish even though his face was as wrinkled as the hard bark of an old tree. However, the The thirst for a successor finally overcame his little sense of shame. He fiercely shouted to the audience, "Who dares to say that I am wrong? Stand up and argue with me alone." The audience suddenly became silent. Whether it was Priest Moley or those professors and instructors of the academy who looked displeased, they all turned their faces away. They all thought in their hearts, "Duel with you, a senior divine talisman master who has cultivated to a high level? We are not crazy." Professor Huang looked at him unhappily and said, "Uncle Yin, what on earth do you want to do?" There were very few divine talisman masters in the world. The seniority among them had nothing to do with their respective sex, but another set of simple and complicated system. Professor Huang asked Yinsei what on earth did he want to do. In fact, what Master Yinsei was thinking at this time was very simple. If the result announced by the Academy is that Ning Ke has successfully reached the top, and if this result is heard by everyone on the stone square and then spread to the world, won't it be a foregone conclusion? Then what else can my younger brother and I do to snatch him away? Ignoring the angry eyes of everyone on the Academy's front yard, Yinsei dragged Professor Huang into his study room. Those who entered the study room with them were all bigwigs who were qualified to participate in this matter or had the power to change the final result. Priest Moley looked a little confused. He felt that he must have misheard something, so he cast an inquiring look at His Highness beside him. Li Peiyin also looked a little strange. He felt that he should not have misheard, so it could only be that Professor Huang had misread when announcing. In order to confirm his thoughts, he looked at his niece beside him. There was no expression on Li Yu's delicate face. Although she had guessed it countless times, and had even hoped for this result countless times during this long time of climbing the mountain today, when this result really appeared, it still caused a violent shock to her world, making it difficult for her to recover in a short period of time. Priest Moley's eyes slowly swept over the faces of those bigwigs, and the responses he got were the ones he did not want to see the most. He slowly stood up and looked at Professor Huang with some confusion. He asked confusedly, "You said that the person who reached the top was Ning Ke?" Professor Huang nodded slightly and said, "It is indeed Ning Quebec." Priest Moley stood stiffly beside the chair and could not say a word for a long time. As the Deputy Dean of the Revelation Institute of the West Hill Divine Palace, he was ordered by the Hierarch to lead a delegation to visit Chang and of the Tang Empire. The main purpose was to fulfill the secret agreement between the two countries and send Prince Longqing to the second floor of the Academy. Priest Moley did not have a good impression of the Academy. In his opinion, there was no need for a God's favored one like Prince Longqing to study on the second floor of the Academy. But since this was the arrangement of the Divine Hall, and the whole world now knew that Prince Longqing was going to enter the second floor of the Academy, then he must go because it represented the glory and dignity of the West Hill Divine Palace. However, who could have thought that after such a long wait, it was not Prince Longqing who finally entered the second floor, but someone else? Thinking of the punishment that he might suffer under the wrath of the Hierarch if this matter was spread back to the West Hill, and thinking of the hundreds of millions of followers of Haotian Taoism in the world who might waver in awe of the Divine Hall, because of this matter, Moley felt as if he had been washed by ice water from head to toe, exuding a piercing chill from the inside out. He murmured, "Impossible, impossible." Suddenly he raised his head and angrily waved at Professor Huang to protest. How could an ordinary academy student defeat Prince Longqing? The prince is only one step away from the knowing destiny state, and that student is nothing. The academy must have done something. If the people outside the study room who were still waiting for the result knew the result, they would probably have the same opinion as Priest Moley. After all, the one who competed with Prince Longqing today was not Wang Jinglu, who was invincible below the knowing destiny state, but an ordinary academy student who no one knew could cultivate. How could such a person defeat Prince Longqing? Could a vole defeat a goshawk? Could an ant defeat a lion? Could the embroidery lady defeat General Xiao? Could Ning Ke defeat Prince Longqing? No, these were all impossible, unless God broke the goshawk's wings and sharp beak, unless God turned the lion into a pile of rotten meat in advance, unless Her Majesty betrothed the embroidered lady to General Xiao as his official wife, or unless the Academy secretly cheated. The bigwigs in the study room all looked at Professor Huang He with puzzled and questioning eyes. Professor Huang He forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart and explained expressionlessly, "As far as I know, Prince Longqing performed very well in climbing the mountain. If it were in the previous years, he could definitely enter the second floor of the academy easily. But you and I both know that the second floor only recruited one person this year, and Ning Ke did reach the top of the mountain before the prince at the last moment." Priest Molly sat back in the chair in a daze. Suddenly he saw Prince Li Peiyin beside him, as if grasping at the last straw, and said, "Your Highness, according to the previous agreement, the prince will enter the second floor of Chang and city in place of the crown prince of the Yin. If not for being a student of the headmaster of the academy, how could the West Hill Divine Palace let the prince leave the judicial department? If the academy finds a reason not to accept him, then—" Li Peiyin frowned slightly and felt very embarrassed. The Tang imperial family had always been very polite to the academy and rarely interfered with it. However, Prince Longqing entered Chang and city as a hostage as the second person in the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace. The two sides had indeed reached a secret agreement, and His Majesty had also expressed his approval of this agreement. However, whether it was the West Hill Divine Palace or the Tang imperial family, no one could have imagined that someone could actually defeat Prince Longqing and enter the second floor of the academy. Therefore, they had never thought that such a situation would occur. Li Peiyin looked at Professor Huang He and said, after a moment of hesitation, "I think this matter should be considered at length." Professor Huang He was expressionless. Li Peiyin looked at Yin Sei and Eunuch Lin, who had been sitting silently in the corner. He thought to himself that His Majesty and the South Gate had sent the two of them here to wait for the result. Naturally, they had the responsibility of supervision. At this time, the two of them had to express their opinions and choose a side. Feeling the prince's gaze, Eunuch Lin stood up and explained to the crowd with a smile, "His Majesty sent me to the academy to pick up someone. It has nothing to do with what you were discussing. Naturally, I can't speak on behalf of the palace. Let me express my opinion. I firmly oppose Ning Ke entering the second floor." Yin Sei blew his beard and stared at him. He said, "Even if you think with your butt, how can that guy be stronger than Prince Longqing? How could he reach the top of the mountain earlier than Prince Longqing? The academy must have a problem." Professor Huang He's face darkened. He looked at him and said, "Uncle Yin, we are familiar with each other, but we still need evidence." Yin Sei stared at him and said, "The academy has evidence. It is said that you did not cheat." Hearing his unreasonable words, Huang He said angrily, "Uncle Yin, are you going to act shamelessly again? So what?" Yin Sei raised his wretched triangular eyes and shouted, "Anyway, the headmaster of the academy is not in Chang, and since the headmaster of the academy was not in Chang or the academy, as the minister of offerings of the South Gate of Haotian, he had nothing to fear. As a sacred divine talisman master, he had no scruples in bringing this matter up. This shamelessly acted shamelessly." The bigwigs in the study room looked at Yin Sei's impassioned objection and were all stunned. Thinking of his previous statements on the stone platform, they could not help but wonder what had happened to the South Gate of Haotian today that made them so strongly support the West Hill Divine Palace. Priest Molly looked at Yin Sei and felt strange. He thought that last year when this old Taoist returned to the Divine Hall, he had humiliated the head of the Revelation Institute and even quarreled with the great divine priest. But today he was so protective. Could it be that he cherished Prince Longqing's talent? It was true that he cherished talent, but he did not expect that Master Yin Sei desperately opposed it and wanted to cherish the talent of someone else. Professor Huang He looked at Yin Sei coldly and said, "Uncle Yin, although you have a high status and seniority, this is the academy's business after all, so it is useless for you to oppose it." Yin Sei angrily rebuked. "The academy belongs to the world. Everyone in the world has a reason to raise doubts and opinions. The academy belongs to the Tang Empire. As a Tang citizen, I have the right to oppose it. You say it is useless to oppose it, but I still have to oppose it. Ning Ke cannot enter the second floor." It was unknown when Liu quietly walked out of the study room and came to the front yard of the academy. An official stood behind her. He had just learned the final result of today's mountaineering from Her Highness. He was shocked and tongue-tied. Then he remembered that he was the one who admonished Her Highness last year, and thought that Ning Ke had no future. He could not help but feel regretful. After tonight, countless people will investigate Ning Ke's background. They will definitely find out that he escorted Her Highness back to the capital last year. In order to make up for the mistake he had made, the official began to think quickly. He disagreed and said, "In any case, Ning Ke is relatively close to us. In this case, Her Highness should stay in the study room and ensure that he can really enter the second floor." Liu said lightly and sarcastically, "Those people inside are older than me and have seen more things than me. But they have forgotten some of the simplest things." The academy opened the second floor to recruit students for the headmaster of the academy. Ning Ke can reach the top first, which means the headmaster of the academy has chosen him as a student. In this case, it is meaningless for those people inside to quarrel for a long time and fiercely. She looked up at the mountain behind the academy and thought about how excited the lad must be at the top of the mountain at this time. She also thought of the return journey, full of killings last spring and the past, when she recruited Ning Ke, but was rejected. She could not help but show some confusion and disappointment between her brows. She murmured, "At that time, I thought that I valued him enough and had given enough sincerity. Now it seems that I finally understand why he rejected me at that time. After all, I can really see through him." The official looked at the expression on Her Highness's face and guessed what she was upset about. He softly comforted her and said, "Her Highness treats his little handmaiden very well. I heard that he has a good relationship with her. In this way, no matter what happens, Ning Ke will always remember Her Highness's kindness." These are two different things. Liu frowned and shook her head. After a moment of silence, she suddenly said slowly, "Of course, now it can become one thing." People in the front yard of the academy pricked up their ears and wanted to hear what the bigwigs in the room were talking about. They wanted to know who was the first to reach the top of the mountain and who could enter the second floor of the academy. Many people noticed that Her Highness had left the room very early and stood quietly in a place not far away. They could not help but start to peep at the expression on her face, try to guess the truth from her brows and eyes. Sidu Ilan, who was close to the princess, did not need to be so far away to observe the expression on her face. She walked directly in front of Liu and bowed respectfully. Then she looked at Liu anxiously and asked in a slightly trembling voice, "Her Highness, who won?" Liu looked in the direction of the study room and listened to the faint, fierce quarrel coming from inside. Suddenly, her thin brows slightly raised and a rather elusive smile appeared on her face. She decided to cut the Gordian knot and settle this matter in advance. He won. It was just 3 simple words without mentioning the name of the winner, but Sidu Ilan naturally understood what Liu wanted to express. She raised her hand to cover her mouth to block the exclamation of disbelief, and her shining eyes were full of shock and joy. After all, the exclamation could not be covered by the palm. The girl's surprised cheers broke the tranquility of the academy at night. She jumped up excitedly and ran to the crowd with a smile. She held her companion's hand and shook it desperately. At this moment, without Sidu Ilan saying anything, everyone knew the final result. There was a dead silence on the stone platform. Zhong Dajuan's face was livid and he murmured in a trembling voice, How could it be him?" Xie Qingyun's body slightly swayed, and he gently let go of Jin Wucai's support. He stubbornly stood up straight and looked at Sidu Ilan with a slightly pale face. He said in a hoarse voice, "You have always known that he was hiding his strength? So you have been waiting to see us make a fool of ourselves." Since the semester exam in the summer, Ning Ke had been ridiculed, excluded, and ignored by the academy students. Only Sidu Ilan and Chu Yuxian treated him the same as before. Chu was the son of a rich and dissolute family and was originally different from the academy students. Needless to say, Sidu Ilan was born in a rich family and belonged to the same world as Xie Qingyun and others, but she had always taken care of Ning Quebec. Today, Xie Qingyun and the academy students were shocked and speechless. When they carefully recalled the scene that day, they naturally thought that Sidu Ilan had long known that Ning Ke had been hiding his strength. Sidu Ilam looked at the pale Siet Chingyun and the academy students who were as shocked as wood and sneered. I don't know what kind of strength Ning K has hidden. I only know that if you had not been watching him make a fool of himself in the past 6 months, you would not have become the biggest joke in the world today. In the past, Ning K was a despicable guy in the eyes of the students and the biggest joke in the academy. However, watching him climb the mountain today, the students were extremely humiliated to find that this ridicule was actually so appropriate. It turned out that they were the biggest joke in the world. With a light clap, the remaining pastries in Chu Yoshian's hand all fell to the floor. He stared blankly at the mountain behind the academy and thought with ecstasy, I actually know such a great guy. If my father knew it, would he still dare to say that I have made friends with scoundrels in the academy? Father, you have made a big mistake this time. There was a dead silence on the stone square. All the students fell into a deep feeling of shame. Some people lowered their heads that were usually proudly held high, and some even became a little numb and sluggish because of this mental shock. At this moment, an angry roar sounded from the study room. Ning K's cultivation is so poor. How can we let him enter the second floor? This roar barely woke Zhong Dajuan up from the huge mental shock. He seemed to catch the last sharp knife, raised his eyebrows, and said quickly in a trembling voice, Listen, listen, that is Master Yensei speaking. He said that Ning K's cultivation is poor and can't enter the second floor. Master Yensei, that is Master Yensei. I heard that he is the legendary divine talisman master and the senior brother of the nation master of Tang. Even he thinks so. Who can be sure that Ning K can enter the second floor? Zhong Dajuan turned his head and stared at Situ Ilan, saying in a trembling voice, Did you hear that? It's not what you think. In the study room, Yensei roared with a livid face. Did you see that? This is the token of the South School of Haoyin. What I said today represents the attitude of the whole South School of Haoyin. I think whether it is the West Hill Divine Palace or His Majesty, this little bit of respect must be given. Professor Huang, he looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. After a long silence, he frowned and asked, Uncle, what do you want to do in the academy today? Can you put forward your request directly, and then we will see if we can discuss it? Well, Yensei quickly changed his expression and pointed at Huang He with a smile, saying, This is what you said to discuss. If you can't discuss a satisfactory result later, I will not comply. Professor Huang He looked at the divine talisman master, who was probably the most senior in Chong and City, helplessly crying. He spread out his hands and said, You first. Yensei coughed twice and said, Speaking of the state, Ning K is far inferior to Prince Longqing. But speaking of some unorthodox skills, he has some potential to be cultivated. So I think he is not suitable to enter the second floor of the academy. He is more suitable to be my disciple. He had said this as calmly and naturally as possible, but it still made the bigwigs in the study room suddenly change their expressions. Professor Huang, he took a step forward with his eyes wide open, and Priest Moli even stood up in surprise. You mean Ning K has the potential to become a divine talisman master? Professor Huang, he stared at him and asked. Yensei looked at his expression and felt regretful. He secretly thought that he had endured for such a long time, but why did he fail at this critical moment? So he decided to throw caution to the wind and said with a cold snort, Yes, so what? I chose him first. In this world, the successor of a divine talisman master was as rare and precious as the phoenix feather in the legend. It was too important for both the divine talisman master and the sect he belonged to. Hearing Yensei's confirmation, the bigwigs in the room could no longer keep calm. Priest Moli took a few steps forward and angrily stared at Yensei and said, Uncle, since you have found a candidate with the potential to become a divine talisman master, why didn't you inform the divine hall first? Nonsense. If I informed you first, would I have anything to eat? Yensei stared at him and said. Now it was Professor Huang He's turn to smile. He looked at Yensei and said gratefully, Uncle, do you think the academy will let Ning K go after knowing this? Yensei suddenly changed his expression. He pointed at Huang He and angrily roared, You shameless villain. If you didn't say we can negotiate, I wouldn't tell you this. Thinking that there was a new student on the second floor of the academy, and this new student might even grow up to be a divine talisman master in the future. Professor Huang, he was very pleased and proudly said, "Of course we can negotiate. If all the negotiations have a predetermined result, then there is no need to negotiate." Yinsei angrily said, "You are shameless." Huang, he smiled and said, "Learn from uncle." Yinsei's beard and hair crazily spurted out. He angrily shouted, "I, Yinsei, have found such a good talent in half of my life. Whoever dares to compete with me for this disciple, I will be irreconcilable with him. Even if I have to burn my body and break my bones, I will crush his bones and scatter his ashes." Huang, he shook his head and laughed. Uncle's words are so cruel. If I didn't have the whole academy behind me, perhaps I would really be afraid. I, Yinsei, have spent half of my life. Ninkei, good talent, disciple, can't coexist with me, crush his bones and scatter his ashes. The furious words of divine talisman master Yinsei went out of the study room like thunder and exploded on the stone floor of the academy. The smile that Zhong Dajuan had just squeezed out suddenly froze on his face, which looked extremely funny. If the fact that Ninkei had successfully reached the top and entered the second floor of the academy was the first thunder in the hearts of the students of the academy, then at this time, a respected divine talisman master crazily shouted to accept Ninkei as a disciple, which meant that Ninkei might become a divine talisman master in the future, was like the second thunder in the hearts of the students. After the thunder, the students of the academy stood on the stone floor in a daze, as if they had been struck by lightning, and did not know what to say at all. Chu Yuxian looked at the pale face of Zhong Dajuan and sighed sympathetically. "If I were you, I would go to the kitchen to pick up a piece of sour, stinky tofu overnight and kill myself. In this way, you won't waste the fresh tofu, and the taste is very compatible with your sour words." Please cast your monthly vote and recommendation vote. The latter is Song Song's natal item, which will never give up. Thank you for your love to me. I will continue to work hard. This chapter is amended 201112010359. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to cast your recommendation vote and monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 160. The Divine Talisman Master Yinsei was in a bad mood. He stared at Professor Huang in front of him and said coldly, "Anyway, your academy can't accept Ning Quebec." Professor Huang, he raised his eyebrows slightly and said mockingly, "Uncle, why can't our academy accept him?" Yinsei roared, "That kid is born to cultivate divine talisman Taoism. Who else in the world is qualified to be his teacher except me?" Professor Huang, he sneered and said, "Only divine talisman masters are qualified to be his teacher? Well, we can find 2 or 3 divine talisman masters, even if we can't find other powerful figures in our academy." When he said this, his tone was as if he was talking about how he could always pull out 2 or 3 green radishes from his backyard. Divine talisman masters were indeed rare and honorable, but the academy was not an ordinary place after all. He was even a divine talisman master himself. The academy's foundation was so deep that no one could compete with it except the West Hill Divine Kingdom. Yinsei suddenly became speechless and said shamelessly, "Anyway, I saw him first. Don't think about robbing him." Huang Yi sighed and said, "Uncle, you are a man of virtue and prestige. Don't always act shamelessly, okay?" Yinsei spat and said angrily, "Look at me, your martial uncle. Every day I go to the brothel and hug girls. Every pore of my body is filled with the word wretched and obscene. Where do you see me as virtuous and respectable? Even if you throw away your old face and feel inferior today, it's no use." Professor Huang, he looked at him and said seriously, "His Majesty the Emperor and the Master of Nation may buy it. Even the hierarch and the great divine priest of the West Hill Divine Palace may buy it. But our academy will never buy it." The conversation in the study room seemed a little ridiculous. However, the dispute between 2 divine talisman masters, no matter how hooligan-like they were, was bound to be particularly tense because of their identities. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became oppressive. At this moment, Princely Peiyin suddenly said with a smile, "In fact, what's the point of arguing about this matter? In my opinion, since Ning Kei's cultivation is only in the no-doubt state, far inferior to Prince Longqing. Then let Prince Longqing enter the second floor, and let Master Yinsei accept Ning Kei as a disciple. In this way, the Empire, the West Hill Divine Palace, and Master Yin Sei will be satisfied, and Ning Kei will still be a student of the Academy's front yard. The Academy will have 2 students with great potential at the same time. Isn't this a perfect ending? Professor Huang, he was slightly stunned when he heard this. He felt that it made sense, but there was something wrong. Li Peiyan looked at him and said gently, "If the Academy is restricted by the system and can't make this decision, you can let Ning Kei withdraw himself. As long as he gives up the qualification to enter the second floor, who in the world dares to criticize the Academy?" Professor Huang, he frowned and said, "Why should Ning Kei give up?" Li Peiyan did not answer his question immediately, but turned to Master Yin Sei and asked with a smile, "Master, I want to know, if Ning Kei becomes your disciple and enters the South School of Haotian Taoism to cultivate, how will you and the Nation Master treat him?" "Of course, we will treat him as a nephew and teach him everything we know," Yin Sei answered resolutely. Li Peiyan looked at Professor Huang. He smiled and spread out his hands, saying, "We all know that the Nation Master doesn't have any outstanding disciple, and Master Yin Sei has no successor. If Ning Kei enters the South School of Haotian Taoism, as long as he attentively cultivates himself, and with the careful training of the 2 masters, he may be the future Nation Master of the Tang Empire. With such a bright future, why wouldn't he be willing?" Professor Huang, he finally understood where the previous question came from. He slightly clenched his hands in his sleeves and stared at the prince's eyes, thinking that the prince's move was really cruel. If Ning Kei was really tempted by the title of the future Nation Master of the Tang Empire and decided to withdraw from the second floor of the Academy, what reason did the Academy have to compete with the South School of Haotian Taoism for him? Previously, Yin Sei had been retreating in order to advance, and advancing in order to retreat. Now the wheel of fortune had turned, and it was the Academy's turn to retreat in order to gain time to think about the response. Professor Huang, he said firmly, "No matter what Ning Kei's opinion is, we must consult all the instructors of the Academy on this matter. Otherwise, it will be a trifling matter." In the early morning, Ning Kei woke up rubbing his eyes at the first glimmer of dawn. Glancing at the glimmer of light outside the window, he silently calculated and knew that he had not been in a coma for too long. He got up and walked to the table. He raised the pot of herbal tea and gulped it down. His spirit was suddenly refreshed. He looked around and found that this should be the residence of the Academy. Walking to the door, he stretched out his hand and slowly pushed the wooden door open. The warm morning light penetrated through the narrow gap of the door and shone into his eyes, causing him to involuntarily squint his eyes. Suddenly, he came back to his senses and looked at the morning light. He stood at the door like a fool, unable to move. The long mountain path, the arduous process of climbing from noon to dusk and late at night, the repeated life fragments of joys and sorrows, the black wilderness and the strange dream all came back to his mind. I reached the top of the mountain. I entered the second floor. Ning Kei stared blankly at the morning light through the crack of the door. Only then did he realize what he had experienced and what he had done. For a moment, he could not help but be stunned. There was a perplexed smile on his face, as if he could not believe that all this had happened. Thinking of the last step of climbing the giant rock last night and the painful choice in the wilderness, he could not help but smile and shake his head. He wondered who had set up the illusion to make a secular boy like him make such a mysterious choice. It was like asking a butcher to think about philosophical problems. Even if he could come up with the right argument, who knew what the reasoning process was? He laughed to the sky and went out. Ning Kei pushed open the wooden door in front of him with a smile and walked into the beautiful morning light. Then he found several officials standing outside the door, and then he actually had to make a very difficult choice. You are not a student of the second floor of the Academy yet, so you still have a chance to quit. You still have a chance to choose a completely different but equally wonderful and bright path. You are even destined to be famous all over the world. Prince Li Peiyan sat in the chair and slowly took a sip of the hot tea at hand, slightly reducing the tiredness caused by lack of sleep. Looking at the silent Academy student in front of him, he continued, I think you should choose the second path, because this matter involves the harmonious relations between the imperial court and the West Hill. Although the Tang Empire is never afraid of any enemies and will never bow to external pressure, Prince Longqing entering the second floor is an agreement made by His Majesty and the Divine Hall. As long as you take the initiative to quit the competition of the second floor of the Academy, the difficulties faced by many people will be easily solved. The Empire will bear much less pressure, and all aspects will benefit from it. Li Peiyan found that Ning Ke remained silent and slightly lowered his head without any response. He was a little displeased and said, "As a citizen of the Tang Empire, it is natural to share the burden of the Empire. Of course, even I will feel that it is too absurd and rude to ask you to quit the second floor of the Academy, not to mention you. So I will give you an absolutely sufficient reason." Li Peiyan slowly leaned forward and stared at the top of Ning Ke's head. He said, "As a noble divine talisman master, Master Yen Sei did not hesitate to pretend to be a fool to take you back as his disciple. You can imagine how much he will value you in the future and how carefully he will train you. 10 years later, you will become a high and mighty divine talisman master, and you will become the hope of the South School of Haotian. The nation master Li Qingshan only has 2 disciples, both of whom are useless. He respects his senior brother very much, and he knows better than anyone else the significance of a divine talisman master to his sect." Ning Ke still remained silent, but his heart was stirred. He had just entered the second floor and won the favor of a divine talisman master. Just overnight, an ordinary and unknown student, a nobody who sold calligraphy in a shabby alley in the eastern city, had become a fragrant sesame cake that both the Academy and the South School of Haotian wanted to fight for. He was even regarded as the hope of the South School of Haotian. Shouldn't the words, "hope of the South School of Haotian," be exclusive to people like Prince Longqing? I know you have a good relationship with Her Highness. Li Peiyan looked at him and said gently, "I can also give you a promise here. As long as you are willing to share the burden of the Imperial Court will never treat you badly. I also owe you a personal favor. In the future, when you enter the knowing destiny state and become a divine talisman master, you will naturally be the next nation master of Tang." Li Peiyan continued, "The second floor of the Academy is, of course, an extremely wonderful place. However, looking back at the history books, how many students of the second floor can leave their names behind? But if you become the nation master of Tang, there will still be countless people who will remember your name after thousands of years." The future nation master of Tang? Although Ning Ke's expression was as calm as usual, his emotions had long been shaken by these words. He seemed to see a brilliant golden road unfolding under his feet. Should he give up the second floor of the Academy to learn from the divine talisman master and fight for the future of the nation master of Tang, or enter the second floor to learn exquisite cultivation methods from the headmaster of Academy? This was really an extremely difficult choice. He even felt that the choice he made last night in the wilderness by the cliff was easier than this one. Ning Ke looked at the prince's face and knew that as long as he nodded, his future would be infinitely bright. He believed that these words were true. He believed that as long as he had the opportunity to learn from the divine talisman master, he could really become the nation master of Tang in the future. If it was not this man who said these words to him, he might really be very tempted. Li Peiyan looked at the emotional reaction in his eyes and vaguely guessed what he would choose. His face suddenly became serious, and his right hand tightly grasped the handle of the chair. He stared at his eyes and said in a low voice, "This is the opportunity that Haotian asked the Imperial Court to give you. If you miss it, you will be punished by heaven." There was no doubt that this was a naked threat. In the face of such a threat, even if Ning Ke really became a student of the second floor of the Academy, he had to seriously consider this threat. Because he lived in this world, then he would be bound by the rules of this world. Ning Ke bowed respectfully and said, "Your Highness, after all, I am a student of the Academy. I have studied in the Academy for a year and have deep feelings for you. I am willing to share the burden of the Imperial Court, but I have to consider the feelings of the Academy." Some people unceremoniously put the power and pressure of choice on Ning Ke's shoulders to avoid angering the Academy. However, Ning Ke was a person who seemed to be straightforward but was actually slippery. How could he take the initiative to take this kind of responsibility? With a light sentence, he directly threw the power and pressure of choice back to the prince. As for whether the academy would choose to give up on him and accept Prince Longqing into the second floor, Ningke was not worried. He and Liu had quite a tacit understanding on this matter. Before the headmaster of academy returned, no one in the academy dared to make decisions on their own. In fact, deep in his heart, there was actually another thought. If the academy could not even resist the pressure of the imperial court and finally gave him to the Sao school of Haotian Taoism, then why should he stay in such an academy? Who would not be willing to be a nation master of Tang? His and Liu's thoughts were not wrong. It was just that there were always some deviations between reality and ideas, because they did not expect that the instructors of the academy also cherished Prince Longqing's talent, and that the instructors were not all Tangs. In the early morning of the academy, the instructors were sitting in the room and arguing fiercely. Indeed, they could not reach the fastest conclusion because the headmaster of academy had not returned. However, it was precisely because the headmaster of academy was not in the academy that they had the courage to express their own views. Chao Jifeng, the associate professor of etiquette, said angrily, "Many people think that the academy cheated in this examination. I don't know whether this is true or not. I only know that Prince Longqing came out of the fog very early. Then why did he stay outside the fog for such a long time? Why did he finally take the last step with Ningke? What on earth happened in the middle?" Professor Chao was a senior professor of the academy, so his words naturally had some power. Although everyone in the room knew that this professor from the Yin Kingdom raised an objection because he was not happy with Prince Longqing's failure, no one could really explain his question. Some instructors even secretly thought that perhaps those in the back mountain had played some tricks in the examination. An old woman in a blue gown with a bamboo broom in her hand looked at the arguing crowd as if she was looking at an idiot. She said, "What a boring discussion. Whoever reaches the top first will be accepted. Such a simple question. Why do you have to complicate it?" Chao Jifeng, you have been going to Chong and to see your prince every day recently, and when you return to the academy, you cry bitterly, thinking that he is the hope of the Yin Kingdom's revival. But what does this have to do with the academy? I can't listen to it anymore. I'm leaving. The honorary female professor of mathematics of the academy left, and several professors who were dedicated to academic service and did not want to be bothered by mundane affairs also left one after another. However, the debate in the room became more and more intense. Many instructors thought that the imperial court's proposal could indeed satisfy all parties. In that case, why not make such a choice? Did they have to offend all the forces for Ningke? When Associate Professor Chao Jifeng was angry again and impassioned again, the door was suddenly pushed open with a squeak. All the instructors looked at the door in astonishment. After a moment, they saw a pink and tender little face poking in, with a pair of black eyes rolling. It was a little attendant who walked in. He was fresh and lovely with a little shyness. Looking at the instructors, he asked softly in a mosquito-like voice, "My young master has something to ask you, so he asked me to pass the message." The instructors in the room knew the identity of the little attendant and asked gently, "What does Mr. Second want to ask?" "My young master got up this morning and found that there were still a lot of irrelevant people staying in the academy, so he lost his temper." The little attendant opened his eyes wide and looked at the people in the room, saying, "He wants to ask you why the notice hasn't been posted after one night. What are those irrelevant people still doing here? Do they want him to invite them to dinner?" Hearing this, the instructors looked at each other and did not know how to answer. They all knew that the second brother of the second floor of the academy was indeed a little silly, but they never thought that he would call people like the prince and Master Yansei irrelevant people. Professor Chao Jifeng glanced at the little attendant and said, "The candidates for the second floor have not been decided yet, so the notice naturally can't be posted." He thought that such a statement would make the other party unhappy, and was ready to explain to him. However, he did not expect that the little attendant was really too shy. After hearing an answer, he lowered his head and walked out of the door. The argument of the instructors in the room began to continue, but it did not take long before the door squeaked again. The little attendant's pink face was covered with drops of sweat, which showed that he had just run in a hurry. He looked at the instructors and said, Young master asked, what do you mean by the candidates for the second floor have not been decided yet? Professor Chao Jifeng said unhappily, what do you mean by not decided yet? Not decided yet means not decided yet. Ninkei actually defeated Prince Long Qing and went up the mountain first. Many people have doubts about this matter, and they suspect that the back mountain cheated. If people are not convinced, how can they decide? The little attendant looked at him blankly, and after a long time, he suddenly came to his senses. He said yes and turned away. No one knew whether he had understood Associate Professor Chao Jifeng's words or not. The room was quiet, and the instructors did not argue again, because they strongly felt that the little attendant of the second brother would come back soon and continue to ask those stupid questions. The door squeaked open. The little attendant looked at Associate Professor Chao Jifeng with his big eyes and asked, Young master asked, who is not convinced? Professor Chao Jifeng was stunned. Looking at the little attendant's fresh and lovely pink face and his blank expression, he really could not tell a lie, nor did he want to push those people outside the academy to the front. He flicked his sleeves and frowned, saying, I am not convinced. The little attendant was about to turn around and leave when he suddenly thought of the latter half of what the young master had said to him on the mountain. He quickly turned around, scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly, and asked, May I ask who you are? I'm Chao Jifeng. Associate Professor Chao Jifeng said unhappily, Why do you ask this? The little attendant showed a matter-of-fact expression and said, Because young master wants to know who is not convinced. After saying this, the little attendant turned around and went out, running to the back mountain again. The door was squeaked open again. The little attendant panted and held the door frame, looking at Chao Jifeng and said, Young master said. Chao Jifeng could not help laughing. He shook his head and sighed. What did your young master say? The little attendant swallowed and looked at him very seriously, saying, My young master said that the academy has never been divided by country and accepts talent from all over the world. Chao Jifeng, you are from Yin Kingdom, so you are loyal to Long Qing. I don't blame you, but you have to remember that you are a professor of etiquette. How did you teach the first class to the students of the academy? What is the etiquette of the academy? The little attendant's pink face raised his eyebrows from time to time, showing indifference and displeasure. He was obviously imitating the expression of the second brother of the academy when he spoke, which looked very funny and cute, causing a burst of laughter from the instructors in the room. However, Chao Jifeng could not laugh. The smile on his face instantly disappeared, and he suppressed his anger and asked, What does Mr. Second want to say? Chao Jifeng, you said in the study room that the etiquette of the academy is the rule, and the rule depends on who has the power to make the rules. The little attendant looked at him and said seriously, The headmaster of the academy and eldest brother are traveling in other countries, so in the current academy, I am the only one who has the power to make the rules. So no matter whether you are convinced or not, you must be convinced. Post the notice immediately. Chao Jifeng was stunned for a while, and then he angrily waved his academy robe and protested. How can such a domineering behavior convince the public? The little attendant did not know that this was a true expression and thought it was also a formal question. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly raised his little hand happily, applauded, and said happily, Young master is really smart. He even guessed this sentence of yours. He asked me to tell you. The expression on Chao Jifeng's face was very ugly. The little attendant looked at him, pretended to be serious, and said, I don't need to convince the public, I just need to obey. An instructor could not bear to see Professor Chao's embarrassed expression at this time, and said, Even if we don't care about the views of His Majesty, Master Yin Sei, or the West Hill, we should always respect Ning Kei's own choice. When the wooden door was pushed open again, the little attendant's clothes were all wet with sweat. He raised his sleeves to wipe the sweat on his forehead, and it took a long time for him to calm down. He looked up at the people in the room and relayed second brother's conclusion for the last time. Respect Ning Kei's own choice? Why should I respect him? As for the nation master of Tang. At this point, the little attendant deliberately paused for a long time. Then he raised his slightly pointed chin, rolled his eyes at the roof, and snorted clumsily from his little nose. He imitated the expression of the arrogant man on the mountain, making him look very cute. Is it very great? On a flat cliff in the back mountain of the academy, green pines were angrily spreading to welcome guests, and white clouds were flowing among them, like a fairyland on earth. There were two people standing on the edge of the cliff. One of them was wearing a very dirty and tattered Taoist robe. The other one was wearing a very strange, ancient crown. Second brother of the academy turned around, looked at Yin Sei, the minister of offerings of the South School of Haotian expressionlessly, and said, "How dare you reach out to the academy and even want to steal my teacher student? Not to mention you. Even the Haotian hierarch of West Hill doesn't have this weight." Yin Sei smiled strangely, looked at him, and said, "The second brother of the academy is really the proudest second brother in the world, and your words are really unpleasant. But I am older than you, so I won't fight with you, lest people say that I bully the younger generation. But I must take Ning Ke away. Even if the headmaster of academy is here, I will still have this attitude. If you want me to die, I have to do it." Second brother looked at him with a slightly mocking smile and said, "Don't make so many excuses. If you're not senile, you should remember that my seniority is higher than yours, no matter from the teacher or Pippi. Since you want to steal Ning Ke from me, how can we not fight?" "I said I won't fight, so I won't fight." Yinsei looked at the crown on his head and said sarcastically, "The back of the mountain of the academy is your home field, and I am not so stupid. Anyway, if I don't fight, you can't fight with me. As for Ning Ke, it depends on his attitude. In the future, my younger brother and I will make sure that he will become the nation master of Tang, which is better than staying in this mountain every day and being bullied by your senior brothers." Second brother rolled his eyes and said sarcastically, "The nation master of Tang is so great? Isn't he still bullied by the Li family and those old fakes in West Hill every day? The nation master of Tang is not a nation master, but a little wife who is bullied but does not dare to cry. Oh, this little boy is so cute. It reminded me of my childhood. Why was I so dull and boring? Study hard and make progress every day." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chijian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 161. Yinsei was so angry that his whole body trembled. However, before he had time to react, he heard another sentence coming from the cliff edge. "Oh, I was wrong. Li Qing Shan, and you still dare to cry. Only children who can cry have milk. Now your problem is that you don't know whether to throw yourself at the left or the right." Yinsei was stunned by this sentence, and his anger was forced to be sublimated into embarrassment. He said angrily, "How vulgar the words are." Second brother turned around, looked at him calmly, and said, "Sage asterisk T is also the way. As long as it makes sense, you don't need to care about the words." Yinsei shook his head again and again. Looking at Fang Zheng, who looked solemn, he sighed and said, Junimo, how do you want the world to see you? I really don't understand how a proud and stupid person like you can live for so many years." Second brother smiled slightly and stood on the cliff edge with his hands clasped behind his back. He said, "I rarely go down the mountain, and I won't provoke those few people I can't afford to offend. Those few people who can afford to offend me don't dare to go up the mountain to provoke me. Naturally, I can live well. As for you, you're never in the list of people I can't afford to offend. Except that you have lived decades longer than me. How can you be stronger than me in terms of ability, state, and seniority? So, in front of you, what can I do even if I'm a little proud? Don't you know how to respect the elderly and the wise?" Yinsei angrily flicked his sleeves. "If living longer is worthy of respect, then when I was born as a baby, wouldn't I have to bow and kowtow to every person I saw? It does make some sense to respect the wise, but Yinsei, how can you be called a wise man?" Second brother turned around and looked at the old face of the divine talisman master with some contempt and disappointment. He said coldly, "If you hadn't been stupid enough to take the pure yang oath to enter the Tao of calligraphy, how could you still stay at the upper state of knowing destiny and not be able to take that step?" The content of this sentence, especially second brother's tone of pity and sorrow as an elder, directly poked Master Yinsei's sore spot. He waved his sleeves wildly and shouted, "I haven't crossed that step, but can you? Second brother looked up at the sky and said with a sneer, "You're old and weak. You don't have many years to waste. But I'm different. In recent years, I've often been touched by something. I know that if I can find an opportunity, I'll definitely be able to take that step." Yin Sei was slightly stunned. He suddenly thought of something and mocked. Rumor has it that Liu Bai of the South Jin Kingdom's first step had already stepped on the turbid waves of the Yellow River. "I wonder if your feet have ever touched the clouds?" Hearing the words Liu Bai of the South Jin Kingdom, second brother's expression changed slightly. There was not a trace of vigilance or resentment in his eyes. Instead, he was excited and said, "Yu Sheng is also a genius and is a disciple of the headmaster. If he can't take that step before Liu Bai, wouldn't he be ashamed to death?" Hearing this answer, Yin Sei was stunned and speechless. He thought that even Liu Bai, the most powerful man in the world, could not destroy this person's pride and confidence. After a moment of silence, he tentatively asked, "How about Yi Su?" Second brother frowned slightly and showed a look of disgust, as if saying that it was ridiculous for Yin Sei to compare him with that loser. Yin Sei gasped and thought that second brother even looked down on the world wayfarers in the abbey. Then he continued to ask, "What do you think of the other two?" Looking at the divine talisman master's face, second brother felt that the questions he asked were getting more and more stupid. He didn't bother to answer and directly said, "Let's cut the crap. Do you want a successor, or do you want a divine talisman master in the South School?" Master Yin Sei was puzzled and asked, "What's the difference?" Second brother was silent and let him think by himself. Yin Sei suddenly understood the hidden meaning in his words. Without hesitation, he resolutely said, "Of course I want both." Second brother tilted his head and looked at him quietly. After a long time, he said, "You really take it for granted." Yin Sei frowned and said, "What do you mean by take it for granted?" Second brother shook his head and said with emotion, "Take it for granted. That means you are dreaming." Yin Sei was speechless. Second brother looked at him and said, "I have already made a concession. If you insist on taking 2 steps forward, then we might as well fall off this cliff together. At that time, we'll see whether you survive or I survive. If I survive, we'll forget about it. If I die, you can do whatever you want. I think this proposal is more concise and powerful. What do you think?" Yin Sei said grumpily, "I'm a talisman Taoism practitioner. If you don't let me fall down and become a meat pie, then you can open the inhibition formation in the mountain to save your life. How could you say such a vicious idea? Why do you hesitate for such a long time for such a simple choice?" Second brother waved his hand and said, "In my opinion, of course, it's more important to have a successor. Otherwise, when you die at the end of your life, there will be no one to send you off. Isn't it a pity that all your talisman Taoism skills will turn into mud and dust together with your body? As for the South School of Haotian, as long as the Tang Empire doesn't perish, as long as those old farts from West Hill still want to preach in the Tang Empire, they can naturally last for thousands of years. How can they lack a divine talisman master?" He looked at Yin Sei and continued, "I can make the decision for the academy. After Ning Ke enters the 2nd floor, as long as you don't force him to join the Haotian Taoism, he can learn some talisman Taoism from you when he's free." Yin Sei said angrily, "How can a wonderful talisman Taoism become talisman Taoism in her mouth? Jun and Mo, don't bully me too much. It's okay if the headmaster of academy said so. But you're just a student of the academy, or did you?" Before he finished his words, second brother stared at him and waved his hand to stop him. He said, "Do you want it or not? Say it quickly. If it weren't for the fact that you first discovered Ning Ke's potential, do you really think that there aren't many divine talisman masters in the academy?" In the end, any argument or quarrel relied not on words, but on physical strength. Such a simple sentence reflected the unparalleled confidence of the academy in the world. Yin Sei suddenly turned into the autumn leaves, dejected and colorless. After struggling for a long time or a short time, Yin Sei finally made a difficult decision. He looked at the white clouds under the cliff and the magnificent city of Chong, and in the distance, and sighed silently in his heart, "Younger brother, I'm sorry." In a room of the academy, Princely Pei Yin of the Tang Empire was still educating Ning Quebec. However, no matter how he inculcated Ning Ke with the righteousness of the country and the interests of the people, Ning Ke, who stood in front of him, was always willing to answer one sentence. Ning Ke looked at Li Peiyan with a sincere smile on his face and answered in a very sincere tone, "I'm a student of the academy, and I'll listen to the academy." The smile on Li Peiyan's face gradually faded, and he looked at him coldly and indifferently said, "Very good." Ning Ke seemed not to notice the emotional changes of this bigwig and replied politely with a slight bow, "Your Highness, you flatter me." Li Peiyan pushed the door angrily, thinking that if Ning Ke really entered the second floor, how would Prince Longqing deal with it? If Brother Longqing knew the news, would he blame him for not doing a good job? How would the imperial court explain it to the West Hill? Thinking of these questions, his expression naturally did not look good. He coldly glanced at the official beside him and asked with the last hope, "How did the academy reply? I believe they won't have other ideas about such a beneficial thing, right?" The official replied with a bitter smile, "Your Highness, the notice has been posted, and the academy has confirmed that Ning Ke can enter the second floor. I've previously asked for the reason, and Professor Huang he said that it was the decision of the second floor, and they didn't need to tell us the reason." Li Peiyan was slightly startled and then immediately became furious. However, although he was a prince of the Tang Empire, he had no influence on the academy, especially the second floor at the back of the mountain, which had a special status. No matter how angry he cursed, it would only expose his own shortcomings. Almost in a flash, he transferred all his anger to Ning Ke in the room. He did not know when, but eunuch Lin came to his side and kindly reminded him, "Your Highness, in my opinion, His Majesty is actually not concerned about how to explain it to the West Hill. As for Ning Ke, perhaps you'd better not pay attention to him." After confirming that the prince and the officials of the imperial court had left the academy, Ning Ke walked out of the room. He walked along the garden's roof corridor for a few turns and suddenly saw a chubby figure standing under the willow tree. Ning Ke walked forward and very seriously bowed to the ground, saying, "Thank you." Chen Pippi very seriously said, "Since you're thanking me, you should be more practical." Ning Ke thought for a moment and said, "I'll invite you to my house for dinner in a few days. I'll ask Sang Sang to make hot and sour noodle slice soup for you, and I'll tell you that her cooking skills are no worse than those in the Eastern City. I usually don't tell others this secret." Chen Pippi did not reply, but looked at him and suddenly said, "From today on, we're senior brothers." Ning Ke looked at his round face, and although he was somewhat unwilling, he had to bow again after a sigh, and said, "Senior brother." Chen Pippi smiled and did not stop him at all. He looked at Ning Ke's head and said proudly, "Junior brother, you don't have to be so polite." Ning Ke looked up, and the two looked at each other and smiled. After a whole year of acquaintance in the old library, a loser who could not cultivate finally became a member of the second floor of the academy. Whether it was Ning Ke himself or Chen Pippi who saw this miracle happen with their own eyes, they all sighed with emotion. Chen Pippi said with emotion, "Teacher once said that there is a kind of cicada in the arid land of the far west. It hides in the mud for 23 years and only wakes up when the snow mountain melts and the flood comes. It takes a bath in the mud, dries its wings in the cold wind, and finally flies into the void." Ning Ke smiled and shook his head, saying, "You and I don't need to talk like this. Do you want me to flatter you again?" Chen Pippi said, "This description is not exaggerated. You're a loser who has no acupoints connected, but suddenly jumped into the blue cloud. What's more shocking is that you have the potential to be a divine talisman master, and even alarmed Master Yensei of the South School of Haoyan." In fact, until now, Ning Ke did not know what was going on. He had never seen Master Yensei, and only knew from others that he was a very great divine talisman master and was the senior brother of the nation master. But why did he choose him? Coming to the familiar environment, beside the familiar wetland, Ning Ke saw the most familiar thin figure. He walked up, looked at Song Song's tired face, and looked at the grass and leaves in her yellowish hair. He reached out to pick them up carefully and said gently, "You've been waiting for me for such a long time. You've worked hard." Sang Sang looked up at him and said seriously, "Young master, you've really worked hard." After a whole night of mental and physical suffering and being shocked by the ecstasy of the final success, Ninkei directly fainted on the top of the mountain. At this time, although he had rested for a while, he still felt a little confused in his mind. Sang Sang did not tell him, but last night she hid under the black umbrella alone like a wounded little beast, avoiding the hurricane that came out of nowhere and raged through the sword forest. She was also very tired, panicked, and weak. The master and the handmaiden supported each other and walked slowly and painstakingly along the wetland in the morning light towards the plain. The front yard of the academy was much quieter than last night. The officials and envoys had already left, and most of the students of the academy stayed. They gathered under the notice and looked up at the familiar and strange name that they had deliberately forgotten for half a year, but today it was forced back to them in such a cruel way. They were shocked and speechless. The students didn't leave even after knowing the final results of the second floor exam. Subconsciously, they wanted to see Ninkei walk in front of them. Only then would they be able to prove that all of this was not an illusion. However, this subconscious thought was a little too masochistic. The morning light was no longer bright, and gently shone on the academy at the foot of the mountain together with the spring breeze. Two figures, one big and one small, slowly walked out from the back of the academy, and everyone subconsciously looked at them. After a night of climbing and rolling on the mountain road, Ninkei's academy's spring clothes were torn in many places. Together with the traces of mud and the stains of pastries, he looked extremely embarrassed. Sang Sang, who was walking beside him, was not much better. She was covered in dust, and there were many grass chips on her hair and shoulders. She looked dirtier and older than the big black umbrella she carried on her back. However, in the eyes of the students of the academy, the master and the handmaiden who were walking slowly were shrouded in the spring breeze and looked very clean and bright, as if they had become a part of the spring breeze and the morning light. This was the so-called scenery. Ninkei walked to the front of his classmates and took out the handkerchief from his chest pocket. He shook it twice in the air to shake off the pastry crumbs. Then he smiled and handed it to Chu Yuxian, whose face was full of fatigue, but eyes were burning with passion. Since the semester examination, Ninkei had spent more than half a year in the academy. It was not too bad for him, but there were not too many good things. Other than the old library, the meadow, and the sword forest, there were only those friends who insisted on being friendly to him. There was no doubt that Ninkei's best quality was to hold a grudge. But what was worth remembering was the real hatred that could only be washed away with blood, and not the rumors that could not shake his emotions. Correspondingly, he could also remember favors. Whether it was Chao Xiaoshu, Chen Pippi, or the two people in front of him, they were all people he would never forget. Ninkei looked at Situ Alan, who was standing in the morning light in an arrow suit, and said with a smile, "I rarely let my friends down. My brain was blocked by shit today, and it took me 5 or 6 hours to write out. Fortunately, I have a day off tomorrow, and I can adjust. This is probably the advantage of having a day off every week. Have a good weekend, and see you on Sunday." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 162. Situ Alan didn't wear the academy's spring clothes today, but a crimson archery outfit. She didn't have any makeup on her face, and her eyes were as delicate as a painting. The somewhat mature crimson outfit was worn by her. She stood in the morning light and looked at Ning Quebec. Her eyes were full of pure joy, especially after hearing Ninkei's words. The smile in her eyes suddenly became brighter. The expressions of the academy students were very complicated. They didn't know what they should do or say at this time to dilute the embarrassment and sense of shame in their hearts. Over a dozen recommended students from the military ministry had walked out at some point in time. They walked in front of Ning Kei and bowed in a very formal manner. Chang Jingming, who was in the lead, looked at Ning Kei's face and said, "We apologize to you." Ning Kei looked at them and didn't say anything. Chang Jingming looked at the expression on his face and explained after a short pause, "It's not because you won the competition, or because you entered the second floor, or even because you won against those people from West Hill on behalf of the academy. The reason I apologize is actually very simple. It's because I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted your character before figuring out the truth. Ninkei laughed and said, we are all from the military. Don't make it too complicated. Last year you once said that you would give me a chance to correct my name. Although I refused, I know you mean well. As for why I refused at that time, the reason is actually very simple. Because I don't need to correct my name, and my character has never been good. Chang Jingming slightly smiled and stepped aside. Then a few more academy students came out and seemed to want to follow this wave to apologize to Ning Quebec Ning. K didn't see Xie Qingyun, but he saw Zhong Dajuan with a somewhat embarrassed expression and a few grade 8 dormitory students who made the most noise in the semester exam. He didn't want to waste time on these small things, and he also didn't want these people to lightly say sorry and erase the past 6 months and stories. He was willing to let these people keep this pressure in their hearts. He knew it would make these people very unhappy and uncomfortable. Thinking of this, he felt very good and happy. After bidding farewell to Sidu Ilan and Chu Yuxian, and nodding to Chang Jingming and those recommended students from the military ministry, he did not even bother to look at the grade 8 dormitory students and walked out of the academy with Sang Sang. Zhong Dajuan clenched his fists tightly and looked at Ning Kei's back with an ugly expression. He shouted unhappily, Ning Kei, if you are not willing to accept our apology, I have nothing to say. You did enter the second floor, and you defeated Prince Long Qing. You used the truth to humiliate us for misunderstanding you. But are you so intoxicated with the pride of winner? Hearing the voices coming from behind, Ning Kei stopped and looked back at Zhong Dajuan and those so-called classmates who seemed to want to apologize, but were actually disappointed and unwilling. He said, first of all, it's not a misunderstanding. Not all accusations of indifference can be explained as a misunderstanding. Maybe you can explain it to others, but not to me. I won't accept it. Secondly, you are not worthy of my humiliation. My goal is to enter the second floor. Even Prince Long Qing is not my goal, let alone you. However, since this fact has humiliated you, I will gladly accept this fact. Finally, about pride. Pride is the most precious quality of us Tangs, and I am not proud because I defeated Prince Long Qing today and entered the second floor. Last year, Chang Zhengming wanted to give me a chance to prove myself, but I refused. I said it was because I did not need it. Why not? In the morning light, Ning Kei held Sang Sang in his arms and proudly looked at his classmates from the academy, who had complicated expressions on their faces. He said, because I have always been proud. I didn't suddenly become proud at this moment. It's just that you didn't understand my pride at that time, or even now. You're not good enough to understand it. After saying these words about pride, Ning Kei did not say another word and directly walked out of the academy. The students of the academy stared at his back like birds carved out of wood. Zhong Dajuan's face turned red, and he clenched his fists tightly, but he could not say a word. Chang Zhengming sighed. Sidu Ilan shook her head and smiled bitterly. She thought that since she thought that Ning Kei was not good enough, and he had fallen into the water, why did he have to slap him again before leaving? Walking out of the gate of the academy, Ning Kei saw two people. He respectfully bowed to Professor Huang, he who presided over the ceremony of the second floor on the right side. Professor Huang, he smiled at him, as if he was looking at the silver hidden under his bed. He gently stroked his long beard and nodded, which was very comforting. Ning Kei did not know the dirty old Taoist on the left side, but he guessed his identity, so he more respectfully bowed to him. Looking at the clean young man in front of him, Master Yin Sei's triangular eyes were full of brilliance, without the usual wretchedness. He was like an old grandfather who finally held his grandson before his death. He sighed with emotion and said, I think you have already known the final result. If you have free time in the future, you can follow me to learn some small skills of drawing talismans. The Divine Talisman Master was a great figure in the world. It was really a rare, lucky chance to learn talisman Taoism from him. Ning Kei had already known the result of the dispute from Chinpipi. Hearing Master Yensei's words, he could not suppress his excitement anymore. He respectfully bowed again and sincerely said, It is my honor to learn talisman Taoism from you. Yensei sighed and said, It seems that you have just entered the second floor of the academy, and you have not been affected by the arrogance there. Not bad, not bad. Ning Kei raised his head and looked at the old Taoist who looked really inelegant. After a moment of hesitation, he could not hold back his curiosity and asked, "Master Yinsei, I have never met you before. Why are you so sure that I have the potential to cultivate talisman Taoism? Speaking of which, I should not have any doubts to follow you to cultivate talisman Taoism. I just worry that I will let you down in the future." Disappointed? Last year, I saw the note you left in Dewdrop of House of Red Sleeves, so I checked you. At that time, I thought that you could not cultivate, and I was really disappointed. Yinsei looked at him lovingly and said, "Now you can cultivate and even enter the second floor of the academy. How can I be disappointed? Unless you suddenly forget how to pick up a pen to write." Hearing this, Ninkei was stunned for a long time. Then he remembered that after drinking in House of Red Sleeves last year, he had some juvenile madness in the name of drunkenness. But there seemed to be nothing special in that note. How could Master Yinsei see that he had the potential to cultivate talisman Taoism just by that account book? Yinsei looked at his expression and knew what he was thinking about. He said with a smile, "A thin account book and a few numbers are chicken soup. I can see that you have the potential to be a divine talisman master, but you can't see it yourself. Because you are a student, and I am a divine talisman master." Ninkei understood this sentence and bowed to accept the instruction. "We will talk about these trivial things later. Today, you go back to the Southern Gate Temple with me. There are thousands of talisman Taoism. Now you're just a piece of white paper. If you want to draw the whole world on it, you have to start cultivating from the simplest way. This is a long road and you have to hurry." Hearing Yinsei's instruction, Ninkei and Professor Huang he were stunned at the same time and asked in unison, "So urgent?" Master Yinsei suddenly became silent. The wrinkles on his face showed both the joy of finding a successor and some inexplicable emotions. He glanced at Professor Huang He and then turned to look at Ninkei quietly. He said slowly, "I am very old." Hearing this, Professor Huang He became serious and slightly bowed his head to give a salute and stepped aside. Ninkei also heard the sadness, anxiety in this sentence. He did not know why he felt so sad in his heart and nodded. However, at this moment, a voice completely different from the mood in the field came out. Eunuch Lin appeared in the field and looked at several people with a smile. "Master Yinsei, Ninkei can't go to the Southern Gate with you today. He has to go to a place with me." Yinsei was slightly stunned. Looking at the eunuch in charge, he remembered that this person said yesterday that he came to the academy under the order of His Majesty not to watch the battle, but to pick up a person. Was the person he was going to pick up Ninkei? Even if the palace wants to see him, it won't be too late. Yinsei said unhappily, "In order to get this student, I have fought with the academy for a day and a night. I don't know how to explain to my younger brother later. Why are you in such a hurry? Only the only divine talisman master in the Southern Gate of Haotian could be so indifferent to the request of the palace and dare to scold the powerful eunuch in charge." Eunuch Lin naturally would not get angry. He smiled and replied, "Master Yin has waited for half a day for this student. But you should know that His Majesty has been waiting for him for half a year." His Majesty had been waiting for him for half a year. His words directly made these people at the gate of the academy speechless. On the stone ground not far away, the students of the academy were still doing their activities after the event. The young students waved their sleeves and thought that what they had done was just a derivative of the misunderstanding, which could be forgiven and should be forgiven. If not forgiven, it must be that Ninkei was not gentlemanly enough. They looked at Ninkei's back and complained bitterly about his arrogance and rudeness. Now he was so arrogant because of a little pride. Let's see how long he could be so arrogant. Then they began to criticize Chang Jingming and other recommended students of the military ministry for being humble and apologizing. Obviously, they had not apologized yet, but they apologized first. Wouldn't they be very disappointed and stressed if they did not apologize in the end? For Situ Ilan, the beloved daughter of the general's mansion, of course no student dared to make sarcastic remarks, but they inevitably cast some jealous glances at her. Situ Ilan was extremely angry when she heard these comments. But when she saw those students were still secretly concerned about the movement at the gate of the academy and controlled their voices, she laughed out of anger and shook her head speechlessly. At this moment, the gate of the academy suddenly became quiet. The students could not suppress their curiosity and looked over. The reason why they were speechless was that they did not know what eunuch Lin meant. Why did the Emperor of Tang wait for Ning Ke for half a year? Master Yin Sei knew about it and even proved it himself. But he did not think of it that way. Professor Huang he hid in the academy every day and painstakingly studied and did not care about the world. Ning Ke and Sang Sang were shocked and confused. After looking at each other, Ning Ke asked carefully, "Eunuch Lin, what do you mean?" Eunuch Lin looked at him with a smile and said, "Did you go to the imperial study one day last spring?" Ever since he entered the academy, Ning Ke had focused all his attention on climbing the stairs and cultivating. He had even forgotten that he was a secret guard of the Tang Empire. As for the calligraphy he had written in the imperial study, he had long forgotten about it. Although the wonderful feeling of catharsis still lingered in his heart, Eunuch Lin's words were like a bolt of lightning that directly awakened all his memories. Although his expression remained calm, his heart was already trembling with shock. He thought to himself, could it be that the palace found out that he had entered the imperial study without permission and decided to punish him? But the meaning of his calligraphy was ancient and completely different from the usual ink. How could the palace be sure that it was him? And even if they wanted to punish him, it should be the bodyguard office's business. How could such a bigwig like Eunuch Lin take action? In a flash, Ning Ke thought of many things. It was said that the emperor was famous for his kindness. Now that he had become a disciple of the second floor of the academy and a student of Master Yin Sei, and it was said that the South School of Hao Yin also thought highly of him, he should not be beheaded for such a small crime, right? In a flash, he weighed many problems and finally said honestly, yes. He tried to appear calm and above board, but everyone could hear that his voice was nervous and dry. Eunuch Lin touched his smooth chin and looked at him with a smile. It really is you. That's good, but this is a serious matter. To confirm it before entering the palace, I asked His Majesty a question. Please speak, Eunuch Lin, Ning Ke said. Eunuch Lin looked into his eyes and asked with a smile, His Majesty asked you, what is the sentence before the flower blooms on the shore? Ning Ke murmured, the fish jumps into the sea. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and follow me into the palace. Eunuch Lin looked at him and said with a smile, My Sir Ning. Because of the silence at the entrance of the academy, the gathered students also quieted down and listened to the discussion curiously. But because of the distance, they could not hear clearly and could only hear a few words occasionally floating over. Master Yin Sei is going to take that lucky guy as a student. What is he still doing there? Which prince's mansion does that eunuch come from? What are they talking about? It seems like they're going to some prince's mansion. A student guessed. Jean Wucai looked at the royal carriage outside the academy and hesitated. She murmured the words she heard. The sea. The shore? His Majesty has waited for half a year. What does this mean? After sending breakfast to Xie Qingyun, who temporarily stayed in the academy last night, she returned to the gate of the academy and was ready to go home with Sidu Alon. She did not hear the previous apology and proud remarks, but heard the last conversation. Suddenly, an incredible emotion surged in her eyes. Looking at Ning Ke beside the carriage, she murmured in a slightly trembling voice, Is this the calligraphy in the imperial study written by Ning Ke? Her voice was very low, but it was clearly heard by the students of the academy. In an instant, the inner stone square fell into absolute silence. Everyone knew that the calligraphy that Jean Wucai mentioned, which was left in the imperial study by someone, was deeply loved by His Majesty. It was said that His Majesty would go to the imperial study to look at that calligraphy in a daze whenever he was upset about state affairs. What was more clear was that His Majesty had invited many calligraphers to the palace to copy that calligraphy, and then selected the best ones to be bestowed to the ministers and scholars in the imperial court, in order to replace those really meaningless rewards in the past. Even in the Tang Empire with simple folk customs, it was the same. His Majesty loved calligraphy, especially the literati and officialdom loved calligraphy. His Majesty loved that calligraphy, so did the ministers and scholars. His Majesty loved that calligraphy, and naturally, the ministers and scholars were not willing to be left behind. This trend became more and more popular and finally became an interesting thing. Every time the ministers in the imperial court argued about how to get a wife, they would actually talk about this calligraphy. The grand scholar said that the emperor bestowed the first copy to him, and the minister said that the copy the emperor bestowed to him was the most exquisite double-hook copy that had the charm of the original. How could those copies of yours be compared to the one hanging in my study room? The ministers who had seen the blooming on the opposite shore in the imperial study all agreed with His Majesty's appreciation. They thought that it was indeed the most charming book in the past 10 years. Even without the blessing of His Majesty's love, it was still a rare masterpiece. In addition, the above-mentioned interesting things, the mysterious calligrapher had not appeared for a long time, and the strange appearance of the calligraphy in the imperial study added a layer of mystery to this calligraphy. Only mystery could be sacred in the world. The calligraphy and the mysterious calligrapher were getting more and more popular, and people were getting more and more curious. Today, the 5 words, "a calligraphy piece moves Chong," were really extremely appropriate. The students of the academy had also taken great interest in this matter, and the children of powerful officials like Jean Wutsai and Miss Gao even had the opportunity to see those copies with their own eyes. But who would have thought that that person was Ning Quebec? Chen Zixin looked at Ning Ke, who was standing beside the royal carriage, and suddenly said timidly, "When we talked about that calligraphy last year, I told you that Ning Ke opened a small calligraphy and painting shop in the eastern city. That calligraphy piece might be written by him." No one answered him. There was a silence on the stone platform, a silence of shock and embarrassment. In fact, there were many students in classroom 3 who remembered the discussion last year. They also remembered how they had mocked and ridiculed Chen Zixian after he had made such a cowardly guess. They had pointed at Chen Zixian's back in the rain-shielding corridor and laughed out loud. But who could still laugh at this moment? Ning Ke, who was regarded as a loser in cultivation and an immoral villain who gave up the exam because he was sick, had successfully climbed the mountain and surpassed those classmates who did not take him seriously. Finally, he defeated the invincible Prince Long Qing. This fact was like a thunder to the students of the academy. The highly respected divine talisman master did not hesitate to cry and shout to accept Ning Ke as a student. This matter was like a second thunder to the students of the academy. After the 2 thunder sounds, most people had been struck silly by the thunder. They could only rely on their survival instinct to force themselves to find the last spiritual escape channel and exit. At this moment, the 3rd thunder sounded. Ning Ke was the calligrapher who wrote the flower blooms on the shore of the opposite shore. He was about to enter the palace to meet the emperor, and he could see a brighter and broader future than most of the people present. After the 3rd thunder, the academy students standing on the stone platform no longer had any reason to continue to be proud, indifferent, innocent, argue, question, or refuse. They were directly struck into countless silent scorched trees, with smoke rising from their heads and their clothes turning into black brittle pieces. Their brains had long stopped working. The louder they had laughed, the hotter their faces were now. The more exaggerated they had laughed, the more they wanted to dig a big hole in front of them. The more indifferent they used to be, the more humiliated they could not control their eyes and looked at the royal carriage. I once heard Ning Ke say a very new word. Sidu Ilan suddenly said, faintly, "That word is aesthetic fatigue. I have never understood how to judge beauty and then how to feel tired. Today, I finally understand the meaning of this sentence. It is easy to become numb and boring to be shocked too much." Chu Yuxian stood behind her, shaking his head and saying with a smile, "But I still feel very good." Sidu Ilan laughed and waved her fist. She looked at the academy students around her and said, "It is indeed very good." She looked at Zhong Dajuan, whose face was pale. Zhong Dajuan subconsciously turned his face away and did not dare to look back. She looked at the student from Yangguan beside Zhong Dajuan and said, "I remember someone once said that if that calligraphy was written by Ning Ke, he would be willing to kiss Ning Ke's smelly feet." The student was terrified and kept retreating. Sidu Ilan smiled and said, "I can ask Ning Ke to throw his shoes over. After climbing the mountain for a day and a night, they should be very smelly." The student screamed and then fell straight down. He had actually fainted because of this sentence. Four-horse carriages sped along the straight and spacious streets of Chang'an. From time to time, the shouts of the bodyguards could be heard. The pedestrians all moved away and then cursed at the dust on the road. The Tang Empire had always been particular about rules. Although they clearly saw that it was a carriage from the palace, the people of Chang'an city did not show any mercy to such an unruly carriage. Ning Ke and Sang Sang sat in the dim carriage and were a little bewildered by the luxurious decorations in the carriage. They looked at each other from time to time and exchanged their feelings. Both master and servant had seen many big scenes and large amounts of money. However, sitting in the royal carriage and officially entering the palace to meet His Majesty, they still could not help but feel a little nervous. Don't be nervous. His Majesty loves your calligraphy very much. Eunuch Lin looked at him and comforted him. They had just left the back of the mountain of the academy and then entered the palace. It was indeed difficult for Ning Ke to wake up in a short time. After hesitating for a moment, he asked with uncertainty, "Eunuch Lin, are you sure that His Majesty really likes my calligraphy and summoned me to the palace, and not for other reasons?" Eunuch Lin was startled and did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Your flower blooms on the shore has already caused such a stir in Chang'an city. Did you really not know?" Ning Ke finally relaxed and said with a smile, "Apart from cultivation, what I like the most is promotion and wealth. If I had known that His Majesty liked my calligraphy and was still looking for me, I would have walked right into the trap. No, I would have brought the most wonderful calligraphy I have ever written and barged into the imperial city, shouting that it was me. Ha! I'm just afraid that I would be beaten back by the guards." Eunuch Lin laughed and looked at him meaningfully. He said, "If you could really barge into the imperial city with your calligraphy, the Yulin royal guards would definitely not let you in. However, why would the guards beat you?" Ning Ke's heart skipped a beat. Eunuch Lin looked at him with a smile and said, "You entered the palace and the imperial study without permission. Do you think that the palace would not investigate this matter and let His Majesty see you? I know that you're a secret guard, and I also know your relationship with Chao Xiaoshu." Ning Ke was speechless. Eunuch Lin sighed and said, "Although the eastern city is a poor place and people rarely talk about these things, since you're the owner of a painting and calligraphy shop, you should know about the discussions among your peers. I really don't know what you have been doing for the past year. I rarely interact with my peers. As for the past half a year, I have been busy studying." Ning Ke thought of the leaves, silver ingots, and brush and ink in the old brush pen shop and smiled. Suddenly, he remembered an important matter and his smile disappeared. He asked Eunuch Lin to return to Lin 47th Street to wash up. Hearing this request, Eunuch Lin was extremely displeased. His Majesty had waited for you for half a year, but you were not in a hurry to thank him. Instead, you were in a hurry to go home and wash up. What was the meaning of this? Did I not explain the rules clearly to you before? The palace would naturally let you wash up before the audience. However, for some reason, Ning Ke was exceptionally stubborn and insisted on returning to Lin 47th Street. Eunuch Lin was helpless against his argument. Thinking that His Majesty admired this young student so much and did not want to make things too awkward, he agreed to his request. Lin 47th Street was exceptionally beautiful in spring. A few peach blossoms poked out of the wall of the Ministry of Revenue's warehouse and looked curiously at the shop across the street. At dusk yesterday, the Nation Master of Tang, Li Qingshan, and the others personally came to Lin 47th Street to examine Ning Ke's handwriting. At that time, they had entered violently and the door of the old brush pen shop was forcefully pushed down. The scene was a mess. Ning Ke looked at the open door and secretly cursed in his heart. He jumped off the horse carriage and rushed inside. The proprietress of the fake antique shop next to him shouted, "Don't worry, nothing is missing. I helped you look after it all night." Ning Ke looked back at the proprietress and felt that the thick layer of makeup on her face had made her more beautiful than ever. He went forward and gave her the warmest hug. He said joyfully, "Aunt Wu, thank you so much, thank you so much." The owner of the fake antique shop stood at the door with a teapot in his hand. Seeing this scene, he said unhappily, "Don't hug me even if you're grateful. That's my wife." Ning Ke laughed and said, Of course I know she's your wife, and your only wife. The owner of the fake antique shop smiled proudly and took a sip of tea. He said, "Who can tell?" The proprietress was about to lose her temper, but Ninkei stopped her and said with a smile, "Aunt Wu, don't worry. I owe you a favor today. Second brother Wu will never marry another wife in this life. I'll look after him for you." The proprietress beamed and repeatedly agreed. Second brother Wu said angrily, "You little thing, how dare you meddle in my family affairs?" Ninkei pointed at the royal horse carriage behind him and asked with a smile, "Can you meddle in this?" Second brother Wu saw the emblem on the bright yellow horse carriage clearly and thought of his miserable life in the future. He suddenly trembled with fear. Walking into the dark old brush pen shop, Ninkei did not ask Sang Sang to boil water for a bath. Instead, he reluctantly closed the shop door and climbed up the wall on the stool as fast as he could. He took down the scrolls hanging on the wall with his own handwriting. He solemnly handed the scrolls to Sang Sang and said with a solemn expression, "From now on, you must take care of any piece of paper I write as if it were a big black umbrella." Sang Sang opened her eyes and asked confusedly, "As long as the paper exists, I will exist. If the paper dies, I will die. This is not a piece of paper." Ninkei gently stroked the scrolls in Sang Sang's hands and said with a slightly trembling voice, "These are all silver notes. I like the content of the second half of the chapter, and I especially like the title. Also, I have something to report to everyone. Jiangya's book always sends out individual chapters to solicit votes at midnight on Monday. This good habit will be maintained. It's just that some of my friends are very generous and use text messages to notify me. I'm very grateful. But the chapter at midnight is a chapter for soliciting votes. Please don't get up to read it, or I'll be very embarrassed. I'm cupping my hands. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 163. The hollow wooden door with flower patterns opened slowly. The little eunuch flicked his horsetail whisk and left quietly. Ninkei looked at the high threshold in front of him and was startled. He tidied up his appearance and entered solemnly. He looked at the precious brushes and inkstones that he had not seen for a long time and smelled the smell of mud ink that had been hidden deep in his memory. He thought of what had happened in this door last year and could not help but feel a little lost. A middle-aged man stood in front of the bookshelf with his back to the main door of the imperial study. The man wore a plain thin cotton shirt and a black and gold belt around his waist. He looked slightly thin. Although his face could not be seen, Ninkei could easily guess his identity. Without the guidance of the eunuch, he did not know whether he should kneel down or bow with his hands folded in front. Logically speaking, it should be the former, but few Tangs were willing to stain their knees with dirt, so he was a little hesitant and embarrassed. The middle-aged man suddenly spoke at this time. His light and gentle tone and the content of his words relieved Ninkei's embarrassment and hesitation in time. He said, "This is not a worship ceremony. Don't think of kneeling down so easily." It was just a simple sentence, but Ninkei had a very strong good impression of this middle-aged man. In his imagination, the image of the domineering Tang Emperor had always been associated with dignified, indifferent, and solemn words. He did not expect the man to be so gentle. "I heard that you were my secret guard." The middle-aged man took out an old book from the bookshelf and asked casually while reading it. Ninkei bowed deeply and replied, "Yes. This secret guard is too secretive. Even I don't know about it." The middle-aged man smiled and took out a bookmark from the edge of the bookshelf. He clipped it to the old book as a mark and suddenly asked, "How did you enter this room last year?" Ninkei was thinking about how to address himself at this time. He wandered between lowly civilian student and lowly official for a moment and naturally excluded lowly official first. After hearing the question, he subconsciously answered, "I entered the palace for an errand and was brought here to wait." The middle-aged man made a sound of surprise and seemed to be a little confused about something. After a moment of silence, he said, "Since you were on an errand, how did you enter my imperial study? Did anyone see you come in at that time?" At this point in the conversation, Ninkei felt a little less nervous, but more confused. On the way into the palace, he had imagined the scene when he saw the emperor. In his imagination, he had thought that after the emperor saw him, the emperor would laugh with great joy, take a few steps forward, and pretend to be displeased to hold his hands to stop him from kneeling. Then, the emperor would let go of his hands and gently stroke his beard. Looking at his fresh and cute face, the emperor would nod repeatedly, his face full of praise. He would forcefully suppress his excitement and say, "Minister Ning, you have made me look for death. I will reward you with thousands of acres of fertile land and countless beautiful maids. As for official positions in court, you can choose." However, this was not the case. The fact proved that although Ning Ke was not as beautiful as Prince Longqing, he would still think too well when he was in a state of excitement and worry about personal gains and losses. Ning Ke was a little disappointed and confused when he heard the emperor's last question. He suddenly understood something. Last year, it was the little eunuch named Lu Ji who arranged for him to come to the imperial study. Since the emperor had been looking for him for half a year and the painting "The Flower Blooms on the Shore" had caused an uproar in the court, there was no reason for the little eunuch named Lu Ji and Commander Su Chongshan not to connect this matter with him. His Majesty did not find him, which could only mean one thing. Whether it was Commander Su Chongshan or the little eunuch named Lu Ji, they did not report to His Majesty that he had entered the imperial study. As for why they did not report it, there could be many reasons. For example, they had forgotten, or they were idiots, or they were worried about what kind of trouble this matter would bring. Ning Ke did not know the reason at this time, but he was clear that if his answer did not match the answer of Commander Su and the little eunuch, it would bring them a lot of trouble, or even trouble himself. Therefore, he frowned and thought seriously for a moment. Then, he shook his head and said sincerely, "No one should know." The emperor listened to the answer coming from behind and laughed loudly. He put the old book in his hand back to the bookshelf and turned to look at the young student at the door of the imperial study. He sighed and said, "You really have a good character. No wonder second brother Chow thinks highly of you." Ning Ke looked at the bookshelf and found that the man was just an ordinary middle-aged man with white hair. He was not as majestic as he had imagined, and his aura was even more terrifying than that of the vermilion bird. Moreover, looking at the man's expression and smile, Ning Ke knew that his answer was right, although he did not know why he was right. The emperor looked at Ning Ke and suddenly waved his hand. He smiled and said, "Come here." Looking at the smile on the emperor's face, Ning Ke's heart slightly tightened. He forcibly suppressed his nervousness and walked over. The emperor pointed at the piece of calligraphy on the table and asked with a smile, "Did you write this?" Ning Ke glanced at it with the corner of his eyes and looked at the 5 big words on the yellow bud paper. He instantly recalled the pride and joy he felt after he finished writing it last year. He replied softly, "It is indeed my absurd work that day." "It is not absurd at all." The emperor looked at him with a smile and said, "I like your calligraphy very much." Finally, the process of praise and appreciation began. Ning Ke suddenly found that he did not know how to respond. It was probably because the emperor's tone was too natural and casual when he said it. There was only calm appreciation and no visible excitement. It was as if he was saying that the empress had peeled the green onions last night and baked the flatbread was very fragrant. How could he be moved? His Majesty obviously did not expect Ning Ke to be moved to tears by his words. He gently stroked his long beard and looked at the 5 characters on the table. After admiring it for a while, he sighed and said, "It's been so hard for me to find you." The emperor had been addressing himself as I before. Now that he suddenly changed to I, the atmosphere in the imperial study suddenly changed. Moreover, the strong meaning hidden in this sentence was many times stronger than the previous one. It had changed from a very distant elegance to a very strong appreciation. Ning Ke was not used to the former and did not know how to respond to the latter. The emperor looked at him with a smile and suddenly said, "The fish jumps in this sea, the flower blooms on the other shore." You only wrote the last sentence, and I always feel that it is a pity. Since I have found you today, why don't you finish the 2 sentences? How about I grind the ink for you? To let the emperor of the Tang Empire grind the ink, spread the brush, lay the paper, and stamp the seal was undoubtedly the highest treatment for those who love calligraphy. In fact, it was a treatment that they did not even dare to think about. Compared with this treatment, even if you put all the popular girls in the House of Red Sleeves into the study to add incense and grind the ink, it would not be worth mentioning. Ninkei was shocked when he heard this. He sincerely declined. How can I do that? As for the fish jumps in this sea couplets, they were originally obtained by your majesty. I am just a transcriber. If I write it again today, your majesty is right in front of me. How would I dare to write it on your behalf? He had been wandering from place to place since he was a child, struggling to survive at the bottom of the Tang Empire. He did not have much experience in interacting with the nobles. On the journey back from the grassland, he could hang out with Li Yu, the princess of the Tang Empire. That was because Li Yu is a delicate little maidservant. Although he knew Li Yu's identity, he had always insisted on treating Li Yu as a maidservant in order to make himself more relaxed. But now he was facing the most powerful man in the world. How should he get along with him? If it were any other inexperienced young man, he would probably be in a mess in the imperial study today. But Ninkei was still Ninkei after all. He was able to survive in the dangerous world when he was still a child. In addition to the chopper at his waist and the courage to kill, his mouth was sweeter than honey, and his ability to wag his tail and beg for mercy was also indispensable. As for pleasing the superiors and flattering the nobles, as long as he was willing to do it, he could do it better than anyone else. When he was in the city of Wei, he was a young soldier from outside the city. He was able to win the favor of the soldiers and the people in the city. He was able to make several generals in the city of Wei dote on him, as if he was their nephew. It was easy for him to use this ability to flatter His Majesty. His Majesty was slightly taken aback when he heard Ninkei's words. He couldn't help but raise his head to look at Ninkei's face and chastised him with a smile. Your flattery is a bit too stiff. Everyone in the world knows that my handwriting is terrible. How can I be worthy of the words precious? Not to mention in front of you. Ninkei chuckled. He was very thick-skinned and did not care about the reprimand. He had seen His Majesty's handwriting with his own eyes. It was indeed not good. But so what? No matter how stiff the flattery was, it was still flattery. Even if His Majesty knew that his handwriting was terrible, he would still feel happy to be praised by others, not to mention by me. Looking at Ninkei's indifferent expression, His Majesty indeed felt a little happy. He thought to himself that although the calligrapher he had chosen was much younger than he had imagined, his eyes were really sharp and unique. His evaluation was most likely to be flattering him. But seeing how natural and sincere he was, perhaps the remaining 20 to 30% meant that His Majesty's handwriting had indeed improved a lot, or was it rather impressive? Let's cut the chatter. Since I have finally caught you, you have to write a few pieces of calligraphy tonight and let me have a good look. Your Majesty, I have used up too much energy in the academy last night. My body is also a little weak. I really can't write anything good. It's not that I dare to go against Your Majesty's will. It's just that writing is all about the spirit. His Majesty's face turned a little ugly, but he thought that what Ninkei said did make sense. He was very clear about how difficult it was to enter the second floor of the academy. Moreover, he thought that the lad in front of him could actually defeat Long Qing and enter the second floor of the academy. He would definitely be a pillar of the empire in the future. He was afraid that Ninkei would be very ambitious. If he only treated him as a calligrapher and an official, he was afraid that Ninkei would feel a little humiliated. Ninkei said as he secretly looked at His Majesty's face. Suddenly, like a magic trick, he took out a few scrolls from his sleeves and respectfully placed them on the desk. Your Majesty, these are the writings that I have been practicing calligraphy in recent years. I have picked some that are acceptable. Your Majesty, please point them out. Hearing this, His Majesty looked at the scrolls on the desk. His eyes suddenly brightened. He quickly bent down and stretched out his hand to flatten the scrolls. Then, he looked at the lines and scribbles on the scrolls and fell into a long silence. After a long time, a joyful exclamation finally broke the silence in the imperial study. His Majesty shook his head and exclaimed in surprise, "Good writing. Really, really good writing." He turned around and looked at Ninkei with his eyes shining. He said, "Minister Ning, I heard that you have opened a shop in the eastern city of Chang'an. I believe that the works that you have made over the years must be more than these scrolls. Bring them quickly and let me have a good look." Ninkei was stunned. Facing His Majesty's eager eyes, he awkwardly replied, "Your Majesty, the scrolls that I have written, that, basically, are used to sell for money." Not far from the south gate of the majestic imperial city, there was a quiet Taoist temple hidden among the green trees. It was where the south gate of Haotian Taoism was located. In the deepest hall of the south gate temple, Yin Sei, the divine talisman master who had been heroic in the academy and wanted to compete with second brother, now seemed to have become a child who had done something wrong. He sat cross-legged on the dark-colored wooden floor. The beard under his chin was scorched as if it had been burned. His eyes were no longer wretched and innocently stared at the floor in front of him. He did not dare to look at the opposite side. However, although he did not dare to look at the opposite side, the dense wrinkles on his face were already full of guilt and flattery. Li Qingshan, the master of Nation of Tang, looked at his senior brother in front of him. His eyes were as gloomy as a resentful woman in the palace. The respect he had for his senior brother had completely turned into disappointment and anger. Ninkei can't enter the South School of Haotian Taoism. This means that although he is your student, the South School of Haotian Taoism will not have its own divine talisman master after you die. This also means that after we die, no one can support the South School. Master Yin Sei raised his head and looked at his junior brother with a silly smile. He comforted him and said, "It is not so serious. Since Ninkei is my student, if he becomes a divine talisman master in the future, he can't just watch the South School be in trouble. Besides, although I am old and dying, junior brother, you're still young. Maybe when you die, Ninkei will already be dead. In this case, what is the use of him?" Li Qingshan looked at his senior brother expressionlessly. After a long silence, he sighed and shook his head. He said, "Senior brother, do you really not know the difference between the two? If Ninkei enters the South School, I will let him be the master of the South School in the future. He will be the master of Nation of Tang. The South School can't be weakened even if it wants to. But if he is only your student, he can only be a visiting professor of the South School in the future. But what is the use of being a visiting professor? Liu Bai from the South Jin Kingdom is also a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. But when did you see Liu Bai risking his life for the Divine Hall?" Yin Sei agreed to the request of the second brother of the academy to accept Ning Kei as a talisman Taoism student in his own name, but completely cut off the possibility of Ning Kei entering the South School of Haotian Taoism. He was ashamed in his heart and felt a little ashamed when he came back to face Li Qingshan. At this time, Li Qingshan's words became more and more serious, which made him even more embarrassed. At last, he did not dare to look at Li Qingshan's resentful eyes and walked away awkwardly with his face covered. All the way through the trees and corridors, the disciples of the South School of Haotian Taoism, Taoist boys and Taoist nuns, respectfully saluted and avoided. Master Yin Sei did not want to show his kind and lecherous side at all today. He hurried forward with a livid face. He gave up the main door and went straight to the side door. When he pushed the side door open and walked into the side alley, he reached out to brush off the green leaves on his shoulder. His wrinkled, old face finally returned to normal. Although he felt sorry for the South School, he finally found a successor. Yin Sei was ashamed, but in fact he could not suppress the joy in his heart. Previously in the South School, in front of the master of nation Li Qingshan, the joy was covered by shame. Now in the side alley, he finally began to show it. A carriage blocked the entrance of the alley. Looking at the emblem of a marquis's mansion on the shaft, he was slightly stunned. A man who looked like a steward jumped out of the carriage and looked at Master Yin Sei up and down. It seemed that he was a little confused about the appearance of this old Taoist. After a long time, he remembered the earnest instructions of his master. He smiled humbly and said sincerely, "Greetings to Master Yin Sei. I am a steward of the Annal Marquis's mansion. Today I come to you by the order of the Marquis. I heard that you have a copybook in your hand." Master Yin Sei stared at the steward's face coldly. He did not bother to think about the other's purpose and directly said in a cold voice, "Get out." After saying this word, he directly pushed the steward away and proudly walked to the entrance of the alley. The steward of the Marquis's mansion looked extremely terrible behind him. However, thinking of Yin Sei's high status as a divine talisman master, he did not dare to have any complaints. He just kept following Yin Sei's footsteps and cried, "Master, please let me finish my words." An old voice suddenly came from the entrance of the alley. "What kind of person is Master Yin Sei? What kind of person are you?" No matter what Marquis Anna wants to ask Master Yin Sei, or invite him into the Marquis's mansion, or come and meet him solemnly, they all have to show the courtesy of a junior. But you, the steward, actually came to meet him. The Marquis is too impulsive. The steward of the Marquis's mansion did not dare to provoke a divine talisman master, but it did not mean that there were many people in Chong and city that he did not dare to provoke. Listening to the seemingly exhortation but actually undisguised provocation, he became angry. He walked out of the alley and looked at the white-haired old man standing beside a green bamboo chair. He waved his hand and scolded, "What kind of person am I?" Suddenly his body became stiff and his voice trembled. He hurriedly knelt on one knee to salute and said, "I am not worthy of your concern. I am extremely confused. I will go back and tell the Marquis's words to the Marquis." The white-haired old man faintly looked at the steward of the Marquis's mansion kneeling in front of him, waved his hand and said, "I did not expect that you have such good adaptability. You are a qualified steward of the Marquis's mansion." The old man's surname was Wang, and his name was Shurchen. He was the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Library of the Tang Empire. He had been in power for 3 dynasties and was highly respected by His Majesty. Even Princely Peiyan had to pay respect to this old man, not to mention Marquis Anil. Although the steward of the Marquis's mansion did not know why this Grand Secretary Wang appeared outside the alley of the Southern Gate Temple, he dared not to say more. He repeatedly saluted to the 2 old men and then fled with his carriage like the wind. Master Yin Sei frowned and looked at Grand Secretary Wang. He cupped his hands and asked, "Old scholar, today is the holiday and there is no need to go to the court. Why are you here? It is not a good reason to go out of the palace." "I quarreled with the old chancellor a few days ago. Is this reason enough?" Grand Secretary Wang coughed twice and replied. Yin Sei thought for a while and said angrily, "You quarreled last winter. How could it be a few days ago? Anyway, the double-hook copy of The Flower Blooms on the Shore is in that old guy's mansion. That old guy not only doesn't let me see it, but also often annoys me with this matter." Grand Secretary Wang could not hide his anger. He stroked his beard and said angrily, "The double-hook copy is too rigid in the original meaning of the lines. It has the original shape, but no meaning. How can it be better than the copy that His Majesty gave me? What you're saying is unreasonable." Yin Sei knew this case well. He shook his head and said, "Everyone knows that if you want to copy the original meaning of the original, the double-hook method is certainly the best way." Yin Sei was the only divine talisman master in the South School of Haoyin. Wang Shurchen was a senior who had experienced 3 dynasties. They were familiar with each other for decades and had a common identity. That was, they were great calligraphers in the world. At this time, when it came to the method of copying, they naturally would not give way, even if the double-hook copy is the best. Wang Shurchen smiled slightly and said proudly, "So what? When I take the chicken soup calligraphy back today, I will hang it in the central hall instead of the study. That old guy will be annoyed." "Wait," Yin Sei said strangely, "what is the chicken soup calligraphy?" "It's the account paper that you took from the House of Red Sleeves." Grand Secretary Wang looked at him with a serious expression and said, "Now the news has spread. Those calligraphy sections that were sold by the old brush pen shop in Eastern City have been taken away. I don't think those sections have any special meaning, but this chicken soup calligraphy is quite different. You concluded that Ning Ke has the potential to be a divine talisman master based on this chicken soup calligraphy. Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could keep this calligraphy in my house?" Yin Sei sighed and said, "This rumor really spreads faster than talisman books." Grand Secretary Wang stared at him and said, "Let's cut to the chase. Anil Marquis is extremely stupid. He actually sent a steward to ask for it from you. I am a Grand Secretary of 3 dynasties. I personally come to the alley to stop you and ask for your student's calligraphy section. This is already giving you enough face. Don't say that you don't want to give me face. Otherwise, Both of us will lose face. I only hear the aura of an old hooligan from your words. I don't think you want to save face at all. Yinsei said angrily. You and I have known each other for decades. I can't believe that you, a grand secretary of 3 dynasties, will be disturbed by such a small thing. Grand Secretary Wang said angrily. If it's something else, it's fine. But the flower bloom's calligraphy has caused too much trouble in Chong in this year. That old man bullied me too much. If I can't get back my face, how can I, a grand secretary of 3 dynasties, have a foothold in the imperial court? Yinsei looked at him and suddenly said, 10,000. The anger on Grand Secretary Wang's face suddenly disappeared. He laughed and said, 4,000. Yinsei took out the thin account paper from his sleeve and handed it over. He said, deal. Grand Secretary Wang took the thin paper. Without even looking at it, he turned around and sat back on the green bamboo chair. He shouted to his entourage, what are you waiting for? Go back quickly. Invite the best Master Xing from the Bao Rong store to the mansion. Then ask the 3rd brother to prepare a banquet tomorrow to celebrate the birthday and invite the guests to appreciate the chicken soup calligraphy. The green bamboo chair rushed away with the wind and dust, and the conversation between the Grand Secretary and the steward could be faintly heard. Old Master, your 80th birthday has passed last month. Idiot. The eldest brother's 2nd daughter is celebrating her birthday this month. Invite that little girl, Jean Wutsai, as well. Most importantly, don't forget to invite her old grandpa as well. If he doesn't come, I'll go and invite him myself. At this time, Ninkei was nervously meeting the emperor in the imperial palace, looking for every opportunity to flatter the emperor. He didn't know that the note he wrote last year after drinking had been sold for 2,000 taels of silver, and it was only a friendship price. As for Sang, who had never had the chance to see the note, she was nervous and speechless in the old brush pen shop on Lin 47th Street. Listening to the continuous knocks on the door, looking at the stewards of various manners who were waving the notes anxiously through the crack of the door, and the people who were excitedly discussing on the opposite side of the street, the little handmaiden didn't know how to deal with the situation at all. Thinking of the young master's instructions before he left, she tidied up all the calligraphy she had collected, opened the bedboard, took out the box, and put it neatly together with the precious notes. Then she took 2 extremely thick iron chains and locked all the doors and windows. After doing these things, she walked back to the front of the shop and nailed the door that was difficult to close with a big iron nail. Only then did she feel a little relieved. Ignoring the waves of noise outside, she wiped the beads of sweat on her forehead and carried the big black umbrella and a few of the most important things that Ninkei had told her. She opened the back door of the small courtyard and quietly slipped out. It was still early at this time, and it was time for lunch. When Sang walked into the brothel of House of Red Sleeves, she didn't see any scene of flirting, but only smelled countless delicious food and wine. She couldn't help swallowing her saliva, as she had not eaten for a day and a night. Mistress Jin's personal handmaiden, Xiao Chao, was holding the railing on the top floor and staring blankly down. Suddenly seeing Sang appear in the building, she was immediately overjoyed and rushed down as fast as she could. She held Song's hands with both hands and complained, "Why haven't you come these days? Did your young master forbid you from leaving? Ninkei is such a person." Mistress Jin didn't let him come to these brothels because she wanted him to focus on his studies. How dare he vent his anger on you? Also, I heard that you have been to the princess's mansion as a guest for half a year. Are you so used to seeing noble people that you have forgotten us frivolous friends? Sang didn't have time to listen to Xiao Cao's complaints. At this time, she had a race against time with all the people in Chong and who heard the news. She directly asked, "When my young master was drunk last year, he once wrote a memo here. Where is it?" Xiao Cao was slightly startled and immediately said, "I'll ask for you." After a moment, Xiao Cao ran back and said, "I've asked. It seems that Sister Dewdrop took it away at that time. Why are you looking for it? It has been so long. Who knows where it has been thrown away?" Chao Yuning always had some confidence in speaking in Chong, and because his brother-in-law was the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works. Since the minister of the Ministry of Works was vacant at the end of last year, his brother-in-law was regarded as the next minister of the Ministry of Works. However, things suddenly changed at the beginning of this spring. A high-ranking official who returned from the river transport governor mansion became a strong competitor of his brother-in-law. His Majesty had been silent about this appointment, and the Prime Minister and those Grand Secretaries had not made up their minds. In such a tense and critical moment, his brother-in-law became more and more low-key and silent. Therefore, Chow Yuning's confidence in speaking in Chong became weaker and weaker, especially at this moment, when he was facing the most popular girl in the House of Red Sleeves, Dewdrop. His tone could no longer be described as low-key. He even sounded a little humble. "I say, good girl, please do me a favor and let me have that invitation card." Chow Yuning looked at the plump girl in the chair. If it was any other day, he would have been swayed and wanted to pounce on her. However, his mind was occupied by that matter today, and he couldn't care about this at all. He said sincerely, "The student you mentioned just now is the owner of the Blooming Flowers calligraphy in the palace. His Majesty has confirmed his identity and is talking to him in the Imperial study now. If I lie to you, I can probably save some money. However, you and I are acquaintances, and he will not treat you like this. Dewdrop, you can't treat me like this either." Dewdrop had already woken up from the previous shock. She rubbed her forehead with a headache and said helplessly, "But the account paper." Chow Yuning corrected her seriously, "Not the account paper. The news from a Southern Gate temple has spread all over Chong. Now everyone knows about that calligraphy. That calligraphy should be called chicken soup calligraphy." Dewdrop waved her hand helplessly and said, "All right, I'll do as you say. But that chicken soup calligraphy is really not in my hands. After I took it back that day, it was taken away by someone that night." "Who took it?" Chow Yuning asked nervously. "Miss, you have to recall carefully. You should know that this calligraphy is extraordinary. The Minister of Offerings at the Southern Gate judged that Ning Ke had the potential to be a divine talisman master based on this calligraphy. This calligraphy will definitely become a famous calligraphy in the world in the future." Dewdrop snappily smiled and said, "There's no need to recall carefully. That old Taoist was a dirty mess with a weird temperament, but he was generous. How could I forget such a regular customer?" Hearing her description, Chow Yuning was stunned for a while. Then he suddenly slapped his thigh and said in shock, "Oh, my little ancestor. That's not a dirty Taoist. That Taoist must be the divine talisman master Yin Sei." Dewdrop was shocked. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief and could not say anything for a long time. She thought to herself, "What's wrong with this world? How could it become so absurd in one day?" That adorable lad turned out to be the calligrapher that His Majesty had been looking for half a year. And that wretched and dirty Taoist who would come to drink and have fun every other month was actually a divine talisman master. Suddenly, she thought of something and stood up in surprise. She ordered the maidservant to carry out a small, abandoned table from the back of the house. "Look at this table. On it is the dirty Taoist. No, it is Master Yin Sei, the Minister of Offerings of the South School of Haotian Taoism, the only remaining divine talisman master and the senior brother of the nation master. He used all his skills to copy the chicken soup calligraphy on this table." She wiped off the dust on the table with her hand and looked at the scribbled handwriting. She felt that she was really a great judge of character and had great foresight. While admiring herself, she said a long paragraph of words without pause. Chow Yuning put his face close to the table and stared at the scribbled handwriting. His eyes gradually brightened, and he said joyfully, "Miss Dewdrop, you can name your price. You don't have to say these words to make the atmosphere better." Dewdrop covered her mouth with a handkerchief and giggled. She said without any embarrassment, 3,000 taels. Chow Yuning straightened up and said resolutely, "Deal." "No." The door of the courtyard was suddenly pushed open. Sang Sang and Xiao Xiao walked in quickly. Chow Yuning asked in surprise, "Why not?" Sang Sang took a careful look at the handwriting on the table and said to Dewdrop seriously, "Sell the rubbings. Take advantage of the fact that you were rarely diligent recently and continue to call for recommendation votes. It is rare to fall to the third place of the weekly ranking list. Please support, encourage, and cherish it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 164. Hearing this, Chao Yuning's expression suddenly changed. Although it would look weird to bring a table to the Grand Secretary's mansion, no matter how it was packaged, it was a unique thing in the world after all. But the rubbing, as long as there was ink and paper, it could be made into hundreds or thousands of rubbing. If he really took this rubbing back, how could he explain it to his brother-in-law? He looked at the little handmaiden who came in without being invited and said with a dark face, "Who are you?" Dewdrop glanced at him and knew what he wanted to do. She smiled helplessly and said, "The table you want to buy, although it was written by that Master Yin Sei, is Ning Kei's original work. This girl is Ning Kei's personal handmaiden, and to be honest, I'm afraid that she can take half of Ning Kei's house. If you really want to take something back, you'd better be polite." Chao Yuning was shocked and quickly went along with the flow. He bowed to Sang Sang politely and sincerely said what he came for. "Little girl, although the rubbing will be precious in the future, I want to buy something unique." Sang Sang thought that this was the first guest of her young master after he became famous, so she should have some preferential treatment. After thinking for a moment, she calmly said, "I'll give you a seal. If it's still not enough, my young master will ask Master Yin Sei to sign this rubbing." After saying this, she took a long time to take out a seal from her arms. Chao Yuning looked at the seal in her hand with his eyes shining and asked, "This is Mr. Ning's private seal?" Sang Sang was not used to her young master being called Mr. Ning. She always felt that it was too similar to Mistress Jian. She frowned slightly. After a moment of silence, Chao Yuning put forward his own conditions. "Can you guarantee that you will only give me a seal?" Sang Sang nodded. Chao Yuning looked up at her eyes and said, "Please state your price." Sang Sang said, 300 taels. Chao Yuning exchanged 3 banknotes for a piece of paper and a bright red seal. He left the small courtyard with some joy and disappointment. Dewdrop and Sang Sang watched his back disappear at the door and then looked at each other. Xiao Xiao giggled as she hugged Dewdrop's plump arm. She shook it as she said, "Sister Dewdrop, just smear some ink on it, wrap it in cotton, and you'll be able to exchange it for 300 taels of silver. You'll be rich this time." Dewdrop answered with a smile. "Only the first one with Ning Kei's private seal is worth this price. But I can print them as I please, ah." Xiao Xiao counted on her fingers and said, "This business is much more profitable than dancing and singing." Dewdrop smiled and did not answer. She picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip. Then she continued to look at Sang Sang. During this period of time, Sang Sang did not do anything but quietly looked at Dewdrop. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became a little strange. Dewdrop put down the teacup slowly and looked up at Sang Sang with a smile. 73. You get 70, and I get 30. Sang Sang hurried to the house of Red Sleeves today because Ning Kei specifically asked her to find the chicken soup calligraphy. But she did not expect that she was too late. Not to mention that the original calligraphy had been taken away by Master Yin Sei. Even the handwriting left on the table had begun to be regarded by Dewdrop as a way to make money. She had been quietly watching Dewdrop to see how she would deal with this matter. Sang Sang felt very satisfied when she heard the words, "You get 70, and I get 30, and I get 30. She smiled and nodded to Dewdrop. Dewdrop lifted her sleeves to cover her lips and smiled. She said softly, "With an old table, I can easily surpass Lu Shui. When you bring Ning Kei here, I'll make him happy even if I'm punished by Mistress Jian." Sang Sang smiled and did not answer this topic. She walked to the table and looked over curiously. When she entered the courtyard, she just glanced at it roughly. This was the first time for her to see the original text of the chicken soup calligraphy. She saw that this sentence, which made her young master noticed by a divine talisman master and had become famous in the capital city, was written as follows: "Young Master Sang Sang, I'm drunk today, so I won't come back to sleep. Remember to drink the chicken soup left in the pot." Looking at the first 2 characters on the table, which was her own name, Sang Sang was silent for a long time. Then she smiled, and her slightly dark cheeks were full of pride and happiness. After Sang Sang left the courtyard accompanied by Xiao Qiao, Dewdrop's personal maidservant came in. She rolled her eyes and said in a low voice, "Miss, although the note was indeed written by Ning Ke, that table belongs to us. Moreover, Master Yin Sei was interested in spending the night with you. It's reasonable to give him and his maidservant some dividends, but the ratio of 70 to 30 is really a little unfair." Dewdrop smiled and gently poked the eyebrows of the loyal maidservant. She said, "You always look at things in such a shallow way. Not to mention that the first two characters on the table are Song Song's name. If I take the biggest share, how can I refuse any high-ranking official in the imperial court who wants to ask for it in the future? Now, the biggest share belongs to Ning Ke and his maidservant, and I'm just a temporary manager. If anyone dares to ask for this small table by force, they won't come for me. They have to go through Ning Ke first." The maidservant was slightly startled, and then she understood the meaning of the young lady's words. She gently bit her lower lip and said, "But young lady, aren't you on good terms with Master Ning Ke? They even call each other brother and sister in private. Isn't it a little?" Looking at the maidservant who wanted to say something but stopped on second thought, Dewdrop giggled and said angrily, "Do you think I'm not kind? I really don't know whether you're my maidservant or Ning Ke's maidservant. He hasn't come for several months, but you still miss him so much. You don't have to worry about these things. Ning Ke has been appreciated by His Majesty and has become the successor of the Divine Talisman Master. Although he can't bully anyone in Chang'an City, at least no one dares to bully him." On the table by the window of a private room on the second floor of the House of Red Sleeves, there were several refreshing snacks and 2 pots of fruit wine. A young lady sat by the window and looked at Sang Sang, who was sent out by Xiao Qiao. She said to the middle-aged guest beside her with a smile, "Do you see that little girl? That's young Master Ning Ke's maidservant. All the girls in our house think that she will definitely marry Ning Ke in the future. If not for this identity, how could Mistress Jian's personal maidservant be so close to her?" The middle-aged guest's eyebrows were slightly white, and his skin was like iron. He looked quite experienced. He looked out the window, following the girl's finger. After a moment of silence, he asked curiously, "This young man, named Ning Ke, is really famous in Chang'an, but I don't understand why you all call him young Master Ning Ke so smoothly. He wasn't as famous as he is today, a few days ago." The girl covered her sleeves with a smile and explained softly, "Young Master Ning Ke is not an ordinary person. Although the girls in our house didn't know what's unusual about him before, he must have something special about him, since he could make Dewdrop call him younger brother and make Lu Shui come specially to dance for him during her vacation." The middle-aged guest slightly raised his eyebrows and asked in surprise, "Why?" The girl thought for a while and found that all the girls in the house liked Ning Quebec. But it was very difficult to sum up what was worth liking about Ning Quebec. She just shook her head and said with a smile, "Mistress Jian has been treating him differently since he entered the house for the first time. Perhaps Dewdrop knows something about him, but just based on Mistress Jian's attitude, he deserves to be called young master." The middle-aged guest smiled and stopped talking about this. He drank some fruit wine with the girl and chatted for a while before leaving. Out of the House of Red Sleeves, the middle-aged man got into a carriage and instructed the coachman to walk freely in Chang'an. After a few turns, they finally stopped somewhere in the north of the city. He paid the fare and got off the carriage. Then he passed through 2 alleys and came to the back of a solemn building complex surrounded by green trees. He knocked on a back door and walked in. In the study room at the back of the Chang and local government, Shangwan Yangyu looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and asked expressionlessly. It took 3 months to narrow down the suspects to 7 people. Ning Ke is the last one among the 7 names. Why do you suspect him? Do you have any evidence? The middle-aged man's name was Tai Ying. He was the head of the Ministry of Justice in Chang and local government. He had worked in the Ministry of Justice for more than 10 years and was very experienced in investigating cases. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "When Zhang Yiqi died, Ning Ke was in the House of Red Sleeves." Shangwan Yangyu's face suddenly turned cold, and he scolded. There were hundreds of people in the House of Red Sleeves at that time. Are they all suspects? Tying bowed his head and cupped his fists. He said in a low voice, but I feel that there is something wrong with this person. Shangguan Yangyu frowned slightly and said unhappily, how can you act based on your intuition when investigating a case? Zhang Ichi died outside the side door of the House of Red Sleeves. At that time, it was not treated as a homicide case, so there was no examination at the scene and no one in the building was detained for questioning. It is really difficult to find evidence. Tai Ying continued quickly. But if you believe in my intuition about the case, please let me continue to investigate. I have dealt with murder cases all my life. I can smell something wrong with this case just by my nose. Shangguan Yangyu seemed to be very interested. He stroked his beard and asked, what problem do you smell? Ningke was not rich before, or even a little short of money. How could such a lad enter the House of Red Sleeves? Why did Mistress Jian appreciate him? Why did the girls like him? What did he want to do in the House of Red Sleeves? I think the problem is that he should not have any relationship with the House of Red Sleeves. But he did. Tying looked at the prefectural magistrate's disapproving look and became serious. He began to narrate another thing that he had investigated. Not long after the censor Zhang Ichi died, Huiyuantong Money House exchanged several notes for a huge amount of 2,000 taels of silver. The person who exchanged the notes was Sang Sang, Ning Kei's little handmaiden. He was not famous at that time and sold his calligraphy very cheaply. How could he have so much money? Who gave him the money? What did those people want him to do by giving him so much money? Hearing this information, Shangguan Yangyu frowned tightly. After a long silence, he said, don't touch anything else. Check the notes first. If there is something wrong, then we can continue to investigate. Twilight shone into the Chong and local government. Standing under the green tree in the courtyard, Shangguan Yangyu, whose face should have been glowing in the sunset, looked livid, which was not in harmony with the surrounding environment. He looked at Tai Ying in front of him, as if looking at the enemy who killed his father. His cold voice seeped through his teeth and seemed to be a little sharper. The notes were deposited into Huiyuantong by the Fish Dragon Gang. That is to say, the 2,000 taels of silver were given to Ningke by Chao Xiaoshu. As for why, if you haven't forgotten the corpses lying on the street beside the Spring Breeze Pavilion that night, you may be able to guess a little. I will not forget that night, Shangguan Yangyu said coldly, because it was that night that countless big shots in the imperial court fell, and I could sit on the position of prefectural magistrate of Chang'an City. As for Chao Xiaoshu's identity, I don't think I need to remind you. Ningke took the 2,000 taels of silver, which is equivalent to working for the palace. Do you still insist on investigating? Tying forcibly suppressed the shock in his heart, cupped his hands and said, Your Excellency, there are many doubts in this matter. There was indeed a masked man beside Chao Xiaoshu at the Spring Breeze Pavilion that night, but I heard that he was a young master from the Yuelun Kingdom. As for the 2,000 taels of silver notes, whether it was to pay for the Spring Breeze Pavilion or from another source, we should carefully investigate it. Shangguan Yangyu roared angrily. How do you want to investigate? Do you know who Ningke is? Even if you didn't know before, after today, everyone in Chang and city will know that name. Evidence. If you have evidence, I will continue to investigate for the sake of His Majesty and the imperial court and the people, even if I have to sacrifice my official position. But if you want to investigate this person without any evidence and only rely on your damn intuition and rotten dog sense of smell, then don't blame me for stripping you of your official uniform first. Tai Ying was hit by the reprimand and lowered his head, remaining silent. Shangguan Yangyu slightly calmed down, looked at him, and lightly asked, Have you informed the military ministry of this matter? Tai Ying raised his head and nervously explained, Since Your Excellency has ordered that this matter should be investigated secretly, of course, I dare not leak it. I can guarantee that except for Your Excellency and me, there is absolutely no third person who knows that the Chang and local government has ever suspected Ning Quebec. That's good. Shangguan Yangyu lightly touched the sparse beard on his chin and said, Erase Ning Kei's name and investigate the other 6 people first. Tai Ying accepted the order and left. Shangguan Yangyu returned to the backyard and began to sit in front of the oil lamp in a daze after dinner. Suddenly he frowned, stared at the oil lamp in front of the bookshelf, and unhappily asked, "Why have 3 more lamps been lit? Quickly extinguish them for me." The prefectural magistrate's wife was sitting at the other end of the study, biting a rope and putting on shoes. Suddenly hearing her master's reprimand, she confusedly raised her head and asked, "Master, now you are also a high-ranking official in the imperial court. Why are you still like this? Is there anything wrong with the official business today?" Shangguan Yangyu was not good-looking or even a little ugly. His temperament was extremely cunning, insidious, and despicable. But he was quite good at family affairs. When he was young, he married a wife who was equally good-looking. After he became rich, he treated his wife with great love and never had the idea of taking a concubine. They got along well with each other and even did not hide many of his private affairs from his wife. After telling his wife what he had heard during the day, Shangguan Yangyu frowned and said to himself, "When I was in charge of the Ministry of Justice in Chang and local government, the first thing I did was to poach Tai Ying from the Ministry of Justice, because I knew that this person was experienced, and even as he said, he had a natural intuition about murder cases. If Ning Ke is really related to Zhang Yiqi's death, I really don't know how to deal with this matter." Shangguan's wife slightly frowned, put down her sewing, poured a cup of hot tea for her master, and said softly, "Since you are in charge of the security of Chang and city and you are paid by the imperial court, you should investigate the case that should be investigated. But there is no evidence," and Shangguan Yangyu looked at his wife and sighed sadly. "I really don't dare to investigate. His Majesty likes him, and I heard that he has entered the 2nd floor of the academy and become the successor of the divine talisman master. Without the imperial edict, how dare I investigate such a person?" Shangguan's wife was startled and said confusedly, "If he is such a person, how could he be involved in a murder case?" Hearing this, Shangguan Yangyu's ugly triangular eyes suddenly lit up. He patted the desk and said in a low voice, "Madam, you are right. How could such a person do such a thing? Master, you can't listen to the nonsense of women like us when you are trying to solve a case." Shangguan's wife was startled by his reaction and hurriedly dissuaded him. "What if it is really him?" Shangguan Yangyu looked at the hot tea in front of him and said firmly, "There is no truth. It must not be. Even if it is not. Seaweed mixed with golden threads, 4 happiness small boxes, xianru and marinade, flour-carved drunken prawns, chicken in clear soup." Ning Ke listened to the eunuch's report and looked at the exquisite dishes on the plates. He could not help but look up at the carved beams and pillars in the hall. His eyes were swayed by the bright palace lanterns on the bronze pillars in front of him. Only then did he realize where he was and what he was doing. In the imperial study, His Majesty asked him for the calligraphy section, but was rejected by him by saying that he wanted to sell it for money. Ning Ke thought that this would definitely make the emperor angry, and he would be unlucky. However, he did not expect that although His Majesty was angry, he did not drive him out of the palace. Instead, he took him away from the imperial study, took a few turns in the garden, and came to a quiet hall, facing the sumptuous dishes. What kind of treatment was it to stay in the palace to have dinner with the Tang Emperor? The gentle and quiet empress even personally scooped a bowl of soup for him. What kind of treatment was this? Even Ning Ke, who was used to life and death and would not blink even if Min Mountain collapsed in front of him, finally could not help but become excited and nervous. The empress picked up an iced bamboo shoot and put it into His Majesty's mouth. She smiled sweetly and said, "Since it is a meal, Ning Ke will have to thank and feel ashamed if old Mo says how many times he has seen the flower blooms on the shore. Otherwise, how can he have time to eat?" His Majesty was really in a good mood. He chewed the bamboo shoot with the tip of the empress's tongue and said with a vague smile, "Then let's eat." Ning Ke held the gold-painted red lacquer bowl in his hand and began to eat. However, at this time, he had no time to taste the taste of the food. His mind kept thinking about everything he had seen. Today, he finally knew that the relationship between the emperor and the empress was as close as the rumors said. But who was the empty seat in front of him? There was a light sound of rings and a faint fragrance. Li Yu, the fourth princess of the Tang Empire, who was dressed in an extremely luxurious dress, came in accompanied by palace maids and old maidservants. Ning Ke was startled, and his eyes subconsciously fell on her face. He noticed that her eyes and brows, which he usually thought were delicate and pretty, looked very beautiful today with a gorgeous palace makeup and gorgeous dress. He could not help but show an expression of surprise. Li Yu, who saw him in the hall, was even more surprised. She could not help but cover her mouth with her hand and asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" After returning from the academy to the palace, she had slept for a whole day to replenish her energy. At this time, she was still a little tired and did not know about the rumors outside the palace. She also did not know that Ning Ke had entered the palace. His Majesty looked at the two and asked in confusion, "Little Yu, you know him?" Li Yu quickly calmed down and explained with a smile, "Father, Ning Ke was the one who escorted me back from the grassland last year. We knew each other then. Last night, when I went to the academy to watch the opening ceremony of the second floor, I saw him." The journey from the grassland had started from the Golden Tribe, passed through the city of Wei, and fought their way through the North Mountain Pass before finally arriving in Chang'an. His Majesty was very clear about the difficulties his daughter had suffered, but he did not know that on this journey, there was a border town soldier named Ning Ke who had saved his daughter's life until today. Hearing Li Yu use the shortest words to describe last year's journey, the way the emperor looked at Ning Ke was different from before. It was no longer pure admiration, but more sincere fondness. Li Yu smiled and asked, "Father, why are you interested in seeing Ning Ke today?" "I think it's not because of the opening of the second floor. I have mentioned to you that there's a piece of wonderful calligraphy in the imperial study." His Majesty looked at his daughter and said with a happy smile, "Did you know that Ning Ke was the one who wrote the flower blooms on the shore of heaven? Everyone in the imperial court admires your ability to read people. But since you know him, you did not know that he had such an ability." It seems that those words were not true. I just did not want to have talent, so I searched everywhere for talent for father and the imperial court. I do not have any real foresight. Li Yu lifted her skirt and slowly sat down by the table with the help of the palace maid. She looked at Ning Ke opposite her with a faint smile and said, "As for Ning Ke's good handwriting, I know that he is good, but I did not know that he is so good. But speaking of which, this guy is best at hiding his strength and pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. I do not know where he learned such boring tricks." There was a deeper meaning in her words. Ning Ke did not know how to answer, so he buried his head in his food and pretended not to hear. Since he had to pretend to be a pig, he had to be a competent pig. But listening to the emperor and empress's laughter and looking at Li Yu's teasing gaze, he felt that the imperial banquet did not have the solemnity of an imperial banquet. It was more like an ordinary family's dinner. More importantly, it was impossible to really have green onions and pancakes in this imperial banquet. But these seemingly exquisite dishes were not delicious even for a pig. Ning Ke used his chopsticks to play with the light and tasteless marinade. After suspecting that the imperial chef had a fake new Oriental certificate, he began to miss the leftovers in the old brush pen shop on Lynn 47th Street, and even the pot of sour chicken soup. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 165. Hua Xiaoduo has given birth. The nth couple that I've matched with in my novel has sent good news. Merit. Congratulations. I wish the baby good health, and you too can be happy for a lifetime. Actually, I don't want to live in the imperial city. Standing by the railing, Li Zhongyi, the Tang emperor, raised his hand and pointed to the dark blue city wall in the distance in the north. He said with emotion, "You will reach the Daming Palace after a few miles out of the city. There are green mountains and dense forests there, and the wind is cool. It will be much cooler there in the summer, and you don't have to listen to those ministers quarrel in the court. No one will bother you every day, and it will be much more relaxing." After dinner, the emperor took Ning Ke for a walk around the palace. It was called a stroll, but it was actually just a chat. At this time, the sky had just turned dark, and the lights in Chang'an had been lit early. There were still many sceneries as far as the eye could see. Ninkei stood beside the emperor and looked at the side of his face. He wondered why the emperor would say such a side to him. Could it be that it was really difficult for the emperor to find someone to chat with when he was trapped in the deep palace? He didn't have time to carefully analyze what problems were hidden in this treatment. He thought of the hot weather in Chang and last year and had a strong feeling of sympathy. He said respectfully, "Then your majesty should move out of the city as soon as possible this year." The emperor put his sleeves behind him and looked at the night sky of the imperial city. He sighed and said, "In the early years, when the former empress said that she wanted to move to the Daming Palace, the ministers would cry bitterly. They didn't dare to say that I was neglecting the political affairs, but they had to talk about the ancestral rules. Although I am the emperor of the Tang Empire, I often have no choice but to choose a place to live. Finally, no one dares to disobey me in these years. But even if I want to move, I have to wait until the summer to shut those old guys' mouths." Ninkei could not help but secretly laugh when he heard the hidden bitterness in the emperor's words. The emperor suddenly turned around and looked at him with great interest. He said, "This year, I and the empress will move to the Daming Palace. Why don't you go with us and stay for a few days? Little you always thinks that the outside of the city is empty and boring, but in fact, the scenery is very beautiful." The smile on Ninkei's face disappeared very quickly. He felt a little awkward when he heard these words. It was not like an emperor inviting a favored minister to rest in the palace. His tone was tranquil and casual, like an old farmer in the countryside who suddenly saw a young relative in the county and invited him to his farmhouse to eat some fruits, boasting that the well water was quite sweet. His Majesty had invited him to spend the summer in the Daming Palace. He knew very well what it meant. Since there was an emperor in the world, there was a royal palace. Since there was a royal palace, there were court officials. These people who were close to the emperor had a noble status and were respected by the people. Although they were not involved in court affairs, they had a great influence on court affairs. Although their salary was low, they could earn countless taels of silver just by writing some poems. If it was in the past, Ninkei would certainly be willing to be such a noble minister. However, he was no longer a young soldier in a border town. In addition to money and future, he also saw the mysterious world. Naturally, he was not willing to be a minister anymore. "Your Majesty, I don't deserve your kindness. It is a wonderful thing to have your Majesty instructing me in calligraphy day and night." Ninkei bowed respectfully with his hands folded in front. He peeped at his Majesty's face and said, "To be honest, who doesn't want to be outstanding and bring honor to their ancestors? But I just entered the second floor and haven't seen the headmaster yet. It's really inconvenient. I just said it casually. You don't have to be so serious." His Majesty smiled and said, "There are many untruths in your words. I don't want to criticize you. But why doesn't Chao Xiaoshu want to be outstanding?" Ninkei did not know how to answer and kept silent. His Majesty suddenly looked at him and asked, "Do you know where second Brother Chao is now?" "I really don't know where Brother Chao is." Ninkei replied. His Majesty walked to the railing and stroked the cold stone railing with his slender palm. He looked at the palace under the night sky and said softly after a moment of silence, "There is a school of palace resentment poems in the past, such as red leaves on the palace walls and old palace maids and so on. But who knows that the palace is so deep? Not only the palace maids and concubines are locked up, but also me. Now that I think about it, when I was the crown prince, I often went to Chang to play and broke into the Spring Breeze Pavilion with Little Chun and fought with Chao Xiaoshu. It's really an irretrievable past." Listening to his Majesty reminiscing about the past, Ninkei felt bitter in his mouth. He wondered why he had heard all these thoughts of royalty. He had just written a calligraphy section, and today was the first time he had seen his Majesty. How could he be qualified to bear such trust? As if sensing Ninkei's doubts, the emperor turned his head and looked at him with a faint smile. "Chao Xiaoshu is the one I like, and you're the one Chao Xiaoshu likes. I took a fancy to Chao Xiaoshu, so there was the name Spring Breeze Pavilion. Chao Xiaoshu took a fancy to you, so you followed him to the Spring Breeze Pavilion for a night of killing. Later, You were sent to the secret guard by him, so you could enter my imperial study. You left that piece of calligraphy in my imperial study, so I know you. These words seem to be roundabout and unclear, but they only mean one thing. Ninkei knew that he could not keep silent at this time and had to join in the fun. So he hurriedly asked, "What does it mean?" The emperor smiled and said, "It means that there is some fate between you and me, just like between me and Xiao Xiao Shu." Fate was a good word. Ning Ke thought happily in his heart. The emperor of the Tang Empire thought that there was fate between him and Ning Quebec. Then in the secular world, he would have an amulet or even a card to avoid death. Many things in the future would be much smoother. The emperor looked at him and said with a faint smile, "Since there is fate between me and you should not be so stingy. Bring more of the calligraphy in the shop to the palace for me to see. Just take it that I am borrowing it from you." Fate was not a good word. Ning Ke thought painfully in his heart. As the saying goes, once you enter the palace, you will be as deep as the sea. If those calligraphy that were like silver notes entered the imperial study, how could they see the light of day again? As for borrowing, it was even worse. If the emperor of the Tang Empire borrowed something from you, would you have the face to ask him to return it? At this time, he could not refuse His Majesty's request to borrow his calligraphy. One had to know that as the emperor of the Great Tang, he had the right and strength to be unreasonable to anyone. But today, the emperor had invited him to a meal and had a heart-to-heart talk with him. Not only did he reason with him for half a day, he even began to talk about friendship and fate. How could he refuse? Ning Ke raised his head and said resolutely, "Tomorrow, I will send the works of these years to the palace for guidance, Your Majesty." The emperor was full of comfort and stroked his long beard. He looked at the young man in front of him and nodded slightly, thinking that he was not an idiot to the extreme. The determination on Ning Ke's face quickly turned into sadness and sadness in the next moment. He looked at the emperor and said bitterly, "So Your Majesty is waiting for me here. The Tang Empire values the law. Even if I am the emperor, I can't take things from people by force." The emperor smiled proudly. Looking at the painful expression on Ning Ke's face, he comforted him and said, "Of course, I will not take your things for nothing." Ning Ke heard this and became spirited. He thought that even if it was the cost price, the price of friendship and the price of fate, the emperor would not be too stingy. The emperor thought for a while and said, "Compared with your handwriting, it is too vulgar to give you some gold and silver." In Ning Ke's view, the most elegant and wonderful thing in the world was silver. As for gold, it could be classified as sacred. At this time, when he heard that His Majesty thought gold and silver were too vulgar, he could not help feeling disappointed. However, he could not say that it was not vulgar at this time, so he had to control his temper and listen to the emperor. He thought that if he did not give him cash, it would be good to give some royal treasures, satin, or makeup powder. Although he did not need them, Sang Sang would definitely like them. If there were leftovers, he could give them to those girls in the House of Red Sleeves. Of course, the emperor did not know that Ning Ke was planning to give the royal gifts to the girls in the brothel. After thinking for a while, he suddenly thought of something and said with his eyes slightly brightened, "Master Yinsei has accepted you as a disciple and said that you have the potential to be a divine talisman master. There's just one thing in the palace that is suitable for you." Ning Ke asked curiously, "Your Majesty, what is it? I can't show it to you now. Even if you see it, you won't understand it." The emperor looked at him and said with a smile, "When Master Yinsei reports to me that you have really entered the talisman Taoism, I will give it to you." Ning Ke slightly frowned and thought, what is it that it should be related to one's cultivation? However, since His Majesty refused to say, he had to salute and thank the emperor for the reward that he had not yet received and did not even know what it was. Seeing that it was getting late, he remembered the thing he had thought about before entering the palace and reported respectfully, "Your Majesty, since I have now entered the second floor of the academy, should I resign from the job of a secret guard?" After being slightly startled, the emperor shook his head in an unquestionable manner to express his opposition. Looking into his eyes, he said, "I have seen the file the Ministry of Military Affairs presented. Your performance in the frontier fortress and the wastelands was excellent, even exceeding my imagination. You are loyal to the Empire, take good care of your comrades, and are good at making decisions and killing people. I need a secret guard like you. But in the academy, I really don't know what to investigate. Ning Ke seemed to ask casually, but in fact, he wanted to find the answer that had been puzzling him for a year from His Majesty's answer. He wanted to know whether the imperial court was afraid of the academy or not, and whether he was a hidden card placed in the academy by the palace. The emperor looked at him and unhappily scolded, "Idiot! The academy is the foundation of the Tang Empire. Will I be stupid enough to shake the foundation of the empire? Who asked you to investigate the academy? I asked you to pay attention to those cultivators." Ning Ke acted like an idiotic loyal subject and hurriedly agreed. In fact, he still did not understand. If he studied in the academy, the cultivators he contacted were all students of the academy. How could he monitor other cultivators? As for being scolded as an idiot by His Majesty, he was even more resentful. He thought to himself that in this life, it was he who scolded others as idiots. For the sake of His Majesty, he would not argue with him. The emperor's expression became slightly better, and he said, "In the future, you will learn from the headmaster of the academy on the second floor of the academy. It is a great opportunity. You must grasp it and work hard. Compared with your studies, the things I have entrusted to you can be put aside." After a short pause, the emperor looked at him with a solemn expression and said, "The future of the Tang Empire ultimately depends on young people like you. You used to be a glorious soldier of the Tang Empire's border army. Now you are my most trusted secret guard and a student of the headmaster of the academy. The Tang Empire will not bury you, and you can't let the Tang Empire lose face. Do you understand?" Ning Ke heard the trust and respect in the emperor's words. His heart trembled slightly, and he replied, "I understand." The emperor turned his head to look at the palace outside the railing, which was as bright as the stars and candles. Lightly, he said, "In the short term, I will not give you any official position in the court because the entire world now knows that I admire your calligraphy." Ning Ke did not understand what kind of logic this was. "If I promote you, although it is because of your other abilities, in the eyes of the court officials, it is still a favor to you with calligraphy. Those guys can join the fun with me, but when it comes to the imperial court, they will still think that calligraphy is useless. Although I don't care what the court officials and people think, I care what the historians will write. So I will not give you a high position and a high title, and I can't stay in my favorite gaming palace for long." The emperor turned to look at him and said, "Because I don't want to be known as a fatuous ruler in the history books." Ning Ke cupped his hands and said sincerely, "Your Majesty is a wise ruler throughout the ages." The emperor smiled and joked, "This is the eternal flattery." Ning Ke laughed and did not feel embarrassed at all. After taking a walk around the palace, His Majesty had said all the things he wanted to say, expressed his emotions, and taken care of the calligraphy sections. Now it was time apart. His Majesty had specially instructed his favorite daughter to send Ning Ke out of the palace. It could be said that he had given Ning Ke enough face. Under the light of the palace lantern, two long shadows were leaning against each other on the flagstone. Ning Ke, who was one step behind, couldn't help laughing. Hearing his laughter, Liu looked at him in surprise. She looked at his expression and then at the shadows on the ground, guessing what he was laughing at. She couldn't help but frown and said in a low voice, "This is the palace, not the northern mountain road. Pay attention to your image." Facing Liu, Ning Ke did not have any psychological pressure at all. He said with a smile, "Your Highness, what are you talking about?" Walking out of the palace, they stood on the stone steps and stopped. Liu looked at him with a faint smile. Her beautiful face looked even more gorgeous under the palace lantern. "How many things are you hiding from me? There should be a lot." Ning Ke looked at her with a smile and said, "What do you want to know?" Liu said thoughtfully, "I want to know all of them." Ning Ke almost blurted out that she was so beautiful. Looking at the palace maids and old maidservants around him, he reacted in time and swallowed his sarcastic words. He said respectfully, "It will be a very long story. I guess Her Highness does not have that much time." Ning Ke pretended to be respectful, but in fact his tone was still ordinary and casual. This kind of casual tone was equivalent to frivolous and rude to the princess of the Tang Empire. The palace maids and old maidservants on the stone steps had lived in the palace for a long time, so they were very experienced in observing and listening. There was no reason for them not to understand. Their expressions suddenly became extremely unnatural. If it was in normal times, the old maidservants would definitely come forward to reprimand them. However, today everyone had seen His Majesty's attitude towards Ning Ke and noticed that Her Highness did not feel disobedient at all. They could not help but have some deviations in their thinking. They turned their heads away without a trace and kept some distance from Her Highness. They did not listen to the conversation between the two and even used their cold eyes to approach the palace maids to lower their heads. Liu walked down the stone steps and approached Ning Ke with a smile. She said, "Speaking of time, if you have time in a few days, come to my mansion. I have heard many stories about you from Sang Sang this year. I would like to hear your own story." Ning Ke knew that there was a strange affection between Sang Sang and Her Highness that was beyond their social class and age. However, he firmly believed that Sang Sang would never tell the secrets of his mission to outsiders. Liu's words were just to tease him. He smiled gently and replied, "Her Highness should know that I will be very busy in the future. I really do not know when I will have time." Liu frowned slightly and said, "I have time, but you don't." Ning Ke looked at her quietly and suddenly asked softly, "Does Her Highness want to recruit me again?" Liu's expression was as calm as usual. She smiled and said, "Isn't that natural?" Hearing her answer so naturally, Ning Ke was startled. After a moment of silence, he said, "Now the price is different again." Liu smiled and shook her head. She said, "Last time, I was sorry that I did not see your true potential and underestimated your confidence. But this time, I think it should be different. Maybe I will give you a price that you can't refuse." Ning Ke looked at her beautiful face and said, "There are not many things in the world that I can't refuse. But princess, you are indeed irresistible." Li was slightly startled. There was anger in her eyes, but a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. However, Ning Ke's words had a double meaning. It could be said that he was frivolous and shameless, but it could also be said that he was respectful. She was embarrassed and did not know how to deal with him. After a moment, she looked at Ning Ke and smiled faintly. She said, "You are really beautiful." Ning Ke turned around and left angrily. He secretly regretted that he did not use it before. In the end, she stole it and used it. The little eunuch who was waiting outside the hall to take Ning Ke out of the palace was Lu Ji. After walking along the imperial garden for a long time, they finally saw the imperial city gate in the night. The swaying palace lanterns were far away from the eunuchs and palace maids walking through the halls. Lu Ji, who had been leading the way with his head down, slowed down his pace and said thank you in a low voice. Ning Ke knew what he was thanking for. He smiled and shook his head without saying anything. The deputy commander of the palace guards, Su Chongshan, was in charge of the night duty outside the imperial city gate. After a long and strict inspection, Ning Ke was finally taken to the duty room beside the imperial city gate. He put on his shoes and belt again. After that, he looked at the deputy commander by the window and said with a bitter smile, "Why do you have to do this?" There were only the two of them in the room. Su Chongshan's face was full of helplessness. He looked at him and bowed seriously. He said gratefully, "I have been worried for a whole day. Now that the illness is gone, I still have to thank you." Ning Ke looked at him, shook his head, and said, "Lu Ji took me out of the palace. His Majesty must have known that you were on night duty here. I even thought that His Majesty might have specially given us some time so that we could check our statements." Su Chongshan said with deep regret, "Now that things have come to this, even if His Majesty has guessed something, I still can't say anything." Ning Ke looked at his nominal immediate superior and comforted him. He said, "Guessing and knowing are two different things after all." Su Chongshan walked over with his short and thick legs. He looked at him and said seriously, "If I really lose His Majesty's favor this time, I will have to rely on you from now on." My legs are short and I can't run fast. You have to run slowly. He had just made a pun with Liu, and now he heard another pun at the imperial city gate. The deputy commander of the palace guards was such a person, and what kind of attitude did he have? Ning Ke was shocked and waved his hands, saying, "Your Excellency, please don't say that. Although my waist and legs are good, they're not that thick." Su Chongshan pretended to be thin and unhappy. He said, "Although your waist is thin, your legs must be fat. Don't stand on ceremony." Ning Ke could not help but shiver when he heard the man's strong Hebei accent. He quickly changed the topic and asked in a low voice, "Your Excellency, isn't it too easy for our secret guards to be exposed? Eunuch Lin had pointed out my identity before I entered the palace today." Su Chongshan explained, "Eunuch Lin is His Majesty's man. Of course he knows the list of secret guards. Other than a few people in the palace, no one in the imperial court will know your identity, including Her Majesty." Ning Ke was relieved when he thought that His Majesty did not talk about the secret guards with him in front of Her Majesty. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked seriously, "Then, Her Highness?" Su Chongshan looked a little embarrassed. He said slowly, "Guessing is not necessarily knowing. Didn't you say this before?" "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Sit down." The emperor waved his hand casually and gestured for Prince Li Peiyin to sit down. He put down the memorial in his hand and suddenly thought of something. He asked, "Did you drink the 2 barrels of double-steamed wine that I asked the palace to send to your mansion? Did you like it?" Li Peiyin frowned and said honestly, "The wine was too strong." The emperor said angrily, "What's the point of drinking wine if it's not strong? You have been in poor health since you were a child. You have been spoiled by your mother. That's why you have such a weak body." Li Peiyin chuckled and said, "Anyway, I have my Majesty to protect me. It doesn't matter if I'm weak." After saying this, he became serious and stood up from the chair. He began to report to the emperor, "The West Hill Diplomatic Corps is preparing to return. Longqing is also leaving Chang'an. Your Majesty, please issue an edict to keep this person in the capital city." The emperor said casually, "The agreement was to let that young man enter the 2nd floor. Since he is incapable and can't enter, he can't blame me. But in this way, the agreement is invalid. If he wants to leave, let him leave." Li Peiyin was a little shocked and said anxiously, "My Majesty, he is a hostage of the Yin Kingdom. How can we let him leave?" The Tang Empire dominates the world by relying on its cavalry warriors and its unyielding spirit, not by relying on these hostages in Chang, and who hang out in brothels every day. The emperor said mockingly, when the Yin emperor sent the crown prince to Chang and as a hostage, it was not to appease me, but to appease himself. If I don't accept his son, won't he have to worry every night that my cavalry will break into capital Chang and attack his bedchamber? In order to let that old guy sleep better and live a few more days, I have to reluctantly agree. You have to understand that it was the Yin Emperor, the South Jin Kingdom, and the others who cried and shouted to send the hostage to Chang'an. It was not me who wanted this hostage. Don't the Tang Empire need to spend money and waste food to feed them?" The emperor waved his hand and said, "Let Prince Longqing go if he wants to. Chang and doesn't feed useless people." Ning Ke got off the horse carriage at the entrance of Lin 47th Street and sneaked to the narrow alley behind the courtyard. He set a few secret signals through the wall, and the back door of the old brush pen shop was pushed open. Ning Ke flashed in as fast as he could. Ning Ke took the hot towel to wash his face and put his feet in the basin of hot water that was at just the right temperature. He let out a comfortable moan and felt that the tiredness that had accumulated from yesterday to tonight had been swept away. His spirit that had been tense for a long time had finally relaxed. In one day and one night, he climbed the back of the mountain of the academy, defeated Prince Longqing, and obtained the qualification to enter the 2nd floor. From a forgotten student of the academy, he became a genius fought over by the academy and the Sao School of Hao-Yin Taoism. Then he was found to be the owner of the Blooming Flower Invitation, entered the palace, had dinner with His Majesty, and chatted with His Majesty's family. Shock after shock, wave after wave, came one after another. Such an experience was really hard to imagine, and it might be extremely difficult for anyone to replicate it in the future. It was too much for the bystanders to take in, not to mention him, the person involved. Ning Ke was still in a trance when he finally lay on the familiar bed, feeling that it was extremely unreal. Sang Sang added half a ladle of hot water to the basin under his feet, squatted on the ground, and looked up at him curiously. She asked, "Young master, what does the emperor look like? Is his beard long and white?" "The one with long and white hair is Santa Claus, not the emperor." Ning Ke reclined on the quilt and pointed at his sore thigh with his finger, motioning Sang Sang to beat it a few times. He said, "His Majesty is actually not that old. What kind of person is he? I really don't know." This was a very honest sentence. Ning Ke had always had a somewhat complicated feeling about the emperor of the Tang Empire over the years. From a natural disaster to many details in the city of Wei's military stronghold, he could feel that the current emperor was a legendary, wise monarch. However, every time he thought of the bloody case in the general's mansion and the murderers who were still sitting in the court, the word wise monarch would always be a question mark in his heart. After returning to Chang, and from the frontier fortress, he began to hunt down the murderers who participated in the bloody case in the general's mansion. It was also during this process that he found out that the emperor did not investigate the case openly, but did a lot of things secretly. Those who should be banished or demoted were demoted, and those who should be marginalized were marginalized. Ning Ke naturally thought that these punishments were far from enough, but he had to admit that the emperor had done enough for a long-forgotten case without any evidence to reverse the verdict or any necessity. As for the culprits of the bloody case in the general's mansion, Princely Pei Yin and General Xiao, one was the emperor's younger brother, and the other was the cornerstone general of the empire. He could also understand the reason why they were still in the limelight. Ning Ke said silently in his heart, "Your Majesty, if you can't do it to your own younger brother, then leave it to me." Sang Sang sat by the bed and waved her small fist to rhythmically knock on his thighs. She looked at his face and could hardly suppress her curiosity. She asked, "Is the Empress beautiful? Her Highness doesn't seem to like her. But last time in the House of Red Sleeves, I heard from Xiao Qiao that the Empress is the most beautiful woman in the world. That's why His Majesty only likes her for so many years." Feeling the small fists knocking on his thighs, Ning Ke comfortably squinted his eyes and said, "I think you should stay away from Xiao Qiao. You can't learn anything from her. You can only learn to talk about the palace like a gossipy woman." Sang Sang said, "I'm just curious." Ning Ke suddenly thought of something and opened his eyes. He sighed and said, "I can't see anything special about the Empress, and it's hard for His Majesty to sum it up. But at least I know that if he were to do business, he would definitely be a good helper." The master and the handmaiden stared at the silver box on the bed. More precisely, they stared at the papers in the box. Their faces were full of heartache. After a long silence, Sang Sang raised her head and asked unwillingly, "Are we going to send all of them to the palace?" Ning Ke said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Of course not. At most 2/3, no, at most half." Sang Sang began to pick out the calligraphy sections from a box. Her movements were very slow and reluctant, and her face was full of heartache. Ning Ke was also very distressed. He sighed with regret and said, "If I had known that one day any piece of paper I casually wrote could be used as a banknote, how could I throw away so many and burn so many? Even if the writing is not good and the ink is smeared a little, it can still be used as half a banknote, right? In this way, how many banknotes do you think we have thrown away all these years?" Hearing this, Sang Sang's eyes suddenly brightened. She jumped off the bed abnormally quickly and violently pulled Ning Ke off the bed. She lifted the bedboard and reached in a search for a long time. Finally, she took out a small box. She took the box to the table and opened it. She took out the paper inside and said excitedly, "Young master, I have picked up many pieces of paper that you used to throw away. Can you exchange them for money?" Ning Ke was slightly startled. He subconsciously picked up the top piece of paper and glanced at it. He found that it was the funeral section that he had copied on the night of Zhuo Er's death. He was shocked and asked, I've already thrown this section away. When did you pick it up again? Sang Sang smiled and said nothing. Ning Ke was shocked and speechless. After a long time, he came to his senses and reached out his hands to hold Song Song's slightly dark face. He said affectionately, Sang Sang, how can I live without you? At this moment, his stomach suddenly growled. Ning Ke took back his hands and rubbed his stomach. He glanced at the dark night outside the window and said, It will be a long time before dawn, right? Yes, young master. Sang Sang asked curiously, What's wrong? Ning Ke said seriously, At this time I miss the hot and sour noodle slice soup very much. Sang Sang was puzzled and asked, I heard that there are at least more than 100 dishes at the banquet in the palace. Are you not full, young master? Ning Ke sneered and said, What do those ignorant people think the palace is? The various delicacies at the imperial banquet are elegant and delicious, but they are exquisite. How can they be served like mountains and seas? I, young master, have also eaten the imperial banquet. In the future, don't say such things outside, lest people hear us and laugh at us for not having a broad vision. Sang Sang nodded and continued to ask calmly, The imperial banquet must be good, but young master, are you full? Ning Ke's face was slightly stiff. After a moment of silence, he said honestly, Yes, I am not full. Sang Sang smiled and said, I will go cook noodles. You can't cook noodles for me. Can you give me some recommendation votes and monthly votes? I said it was blocked today, but I still wrote 8,000 words. Recently, I have been so diligent and honest that even God is angry. Besides, I don't have the strength to revise it. Just rough it first. I will fix it tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 166. After getting up in the morning, Sang Sang combed Ning Ke's hair and fetched some hot water. Then she went out of the shop and bought 2 bowls of hot and sour noodle soup with 2 spoonfuls of minced beef. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, Ning Ke put on an unlined robe and began to have breakfast. Sang Sang took out clothes and shoes to match them. Last night, the Academy's spring clothes had been ironed tightly, and the shoes and socks were all new. Ning Ke's serious and dignified handling of his clothes over the years could only be compared to last spring on the opening day of the Academy. With Song Song's help, Ning Ke began to put on his clothes. He held the brand-new, densely woven fine flower belt with both hands and pulled it hard. Sang Sang picked up a lot of tokens from the bedside and stuffed them into his belt. It took her a long time to stuff them all into his belt. Ning Ke took the quaint and small wooden token from her hand. His fingertips slowly stroked the smooth lines on it. He wondered why His Majesty gave him this waist token of the Imperial Center Administration last night, and it seemed to have existed for many years. The waist token should have been tied to the belt instead of being stuffed into the clothes. But Ning Ke had too many waist tokens in his hands. The waist token of the Secret Guard, the waist token of the Academy, the waist token of the 2nd floor of the Academy, the waist token of a visiting minister given by the Fish Dragon Gang last year, and the new waist token of the Imperial Center Administration. If he hung all of them on his waist, he could totally go dancing. Ning Ke touched the bulging bulge on his waist and twisted it in front of Sang Sang. He said, I've been in Chang'an for a year and earn a lot of money in tokens. But your young master's waist is not thick enough. If there are more tokens in the future, I'm afraid I won't be able to hang them. Sang Sang looked up at him and said with a smile, Young master, don't be so proud, okay? Ning Ke said proudly, I had to pretend to be quiet and gentle outside. Why can't I be proud at home? Outside the front door of the old brush pen shop, the horse carriage had been quietly waiting in the alley under the morning light. But today, old Duan did not wait in the carriage, but stood outside the shop with a very respectful look. The coachman old Duan did not know about the 2nd floor of the Academy, nor did he know about the flower blooming on the opposite shore heaven. But he was called over by the boss of the carriage and horse shop last night, and was warned. His boss told him that he was lucky and that he must serve Ning Ke well in the future. Therefore, he took out the energy that he used to serve his wife at home and got up in the middle of the night. He changed into a set of clean clothes and brushed his teeth with a willow branch dipped in expensive powder for the first time. He also brushed the horse carriage clean and shiny and arrived at Lynn 47th Street ahead of time to wait. Looking at the clean coachman and horse carriage, Ning Kei could not help but feel a little surprised. After asking a few questions, he guessed that the boss of the carriage and horse shop probably knew something. He could not help but smile and shake his head, thinking that it was hard not to be proud. The carriage gradually moved away from the eastern city and went out of the south gate of Chong and via the Vermilion Bird Avenue. It went on the official road of the Empire and headed towards the fairyland-like academy in the distance. Ninkei looked at the green trees and wildflowers along the road outside the window with a calm expression. He had seen the spring scenery on this road so many times that it could no longer arouse his thoughts. After looking at it for a while, he put down the curtain. Sitting in the slightly shaking carriage, he slowly closed his eyes. The fatigue and tension of the past few days had long left his body, but this was the first time that he had a chance to calmly recall the experience of these days. The morning light passed through the curtain and then through the eyelids, turning into a very dim light, which was very similar to the light intensity of the wilderness that was about to usher in the night. His thoughts instantly drifted back to those strange dreams and the strange illusions he saw during the process of climbing the mountain. After a long time, Ninkei opened his eyes and shook his head. In the previous time, he once again reviewed the intertwining of light and darkness, the calling from the farthest place between heaven and earth and the deepest heart, and then found that these had nothing to do with him. If the last step was the test of the academy, why would the grand cultivator of the academy make such a mysterious illusion, and why would he be right? The selection test before climbing to the top of the back mountain of the academy was too metaphysical and too solemn. And Ninkei was just a weak cultivator who had just entered the no-doubt state. Asking him to answer this question was like asking a philosophy professor of Heidelberg University to catch a child who had just entered elementary school. Who are you? Where do you come from? And where do you want to go? The boy would not have held his head in his hands and pondered for half a century until he had turned into a statue and could not answer, but he would have answered in a loud voice. My name is Soen Vich. I come from Frankfurt, and I am going fishing in the Neckar. Perhaps the philosophy professor of Heidelberg University also taught theology, or perhaps this professor was similar to the Zen masters in ancient China, who liked to play the trick of returning to the original and returning to the original. Hearing this answer, Ninkei's thin body shook violently. He felt that the child's answer seemed simple, but in fact it was not simple. He found the ultimate path directly from the heart, and increasingly felt that the child was a rare genius. He was about to officially enter the second floor of the academy to study, but to be honest, until now he still did not know why the academy, why the long mountain road, and why the bigwigs who set up the illusion selection would choose him. After thinking for a long time, Ninkei could only come to this conclusion. The headmaster of the academy is too profound, so he is confused, and I am that child. On the wide straight road in the southwest of Chong, and several carriages and dozens of knights were silently moving forward. These carriages were mainly decorated in black and gold, exuding an indescribable sense of luxury and solemnity. Although the dozens of knights were not wearing armor, their neat black robes and determined expressions on their faces still exuded a sense of sacredness and inviolability. These knights were the world-renowned papal guardians of the West Hill Divine Kingdom, known as the world's most elite cavalry. The carriages that were qualified to be protected by them were undoubtedly bigwigs from the Divine Hall. It was still early at this time, but the carriages appeared on the road south of Chong, and indicating that they had left Chong, and as soon as the city gate opened. If the team consisting of bigwigs from the Divine Hall and papal guardians were walking in other countries, it would definitely attract countless onlookers and cheers, and there might even be many believers kowtowing on the road. But now they were in the territory of the Tang Empire, and it was still early. No one on either side of the road looked at them, and no one offered pious tears. The team just moved forward silently and quickly, giving people a feeling that they wanted to leave as soon as possible at all costs. Prince Longqing sat in the middle of the luxurious yet solemn black and gold horse carriage. His calm eyes looked through the window at the Tang people's houses and the fields of rape flowers that looked like golden blankets. He listened to the sound of the horses' hooves and the night's breathing. He felt the oppressive atmosphere and the strange silence. Suddenly, he smiled and said, "When you came, the whole Chang'an city was in jubilation. The believers, women and children lined the road to welcome you, and fruits and flowers were thrown at the carriages. But when you leave, you are so silent and even deliberately choose to leave when the city gate is open. Don't you think you're like a stray dog?" Sitting opposite him, Priest Moli, the deputy head of the Revelation Institute, slightly changed his expression. He did not understand why Prince Longqing would say such a thing. He forcibly suppressed his anger and said, "Why do you humiliate yourself like this?" Prince Longqing showed a faint expression of ridicule and said, "No matter where the papal guardians are in the world, they wear golden armor and shine like gods. But when you enter the territory of the Tang people, you have to take off your armor and hand over your spear. Otherwise, you're not allowed to enter. This is a real humiliation." Before Moli said anything, he continued with a smile, "Deputy head, do you know why I live in the Peach Alley in Chang'an City?" Priest Moli was slightly shocked. He did not know whether Prince Longqing was trying to test him. But looking at his smiling face, he did not know why his heart became colder and colder. After a moment of hesitation, he honestly answered, "Because the prince's natal item is the peach blossom." "Yes, then do you know why I chose the peach blossom as my natal item?" Prince Longqing asked. Priest Moli shook his head. People in the West Hill Divine Palace did not know the real reason. Because when the headmaster of the academy entered the West Hill, he drank wine and cut down all the peach blossoms on the Divine Mountain. But no one dared to stop him. Prince Longqing looked out the window at the beautiful rape fields and said calmly, "This is the biggest humiliation that the West Hill Divine Palace has suffered in the past 100 years. I chose the peach blossom as my natal item to remind myself not to forget this humiliation." He continued indifferently, "This time, I lowered myself to accept the test of the second floor of the academy because I want to have the opportunity to learn from the headmaster of the academy. I hope that I can avenge this humiliation on behalf of the Divine Hall in the future. But I did not expect that I would be humiliated by Ning Ke again." Priest Moli wanted to comfort him, but found that he could not find any suitable words. "You just said that I was humiliating myself. In fact, you are wrong. Humiliation has nothing to do with who initiated it. It only matters about strength. If I am stronger than others, then those words are ridicule. If I am weaker than others, then those words are self-humiliation. The Tangs can disarm my apologetic divine army. The headmaster of the academy can cut down all the peach blossoms on the mountain, and Ning Ke can force me to flee Chang'an like a dog. It is not because they want to humiliate me, but because they are stronger in some aspects. But I am very grateful for this humiliation. Let me tell you a piece of good news. Maybe I have already taken that step. Now I only hope that Ning Ke can really become strong quickly, so that I can have the opportunity to avenge this humiliation." Hearing this, Priest Moli was shocked and then ecstatic. He thought that if Prince Longqing could enter the knowing destiny state during the journey, then the Divine Hall might forgive him for the humiliation he brought to the Divine Hall. After repeatedly congratulating him, he had secretly made up his mind to hold on to the prince's thigh more tightly in the future. Suddenly he thought of something and asked in a low voice, "Crown Prince Chongming has returned to the Yin Kingdom. The good news that the prince has entered the knowing destiny state. Should we send someone to inform the Emperor of Yin as soon as possible?" Prince Longqing slightly laughed at himself and said, "What's the point of letting my father know about this? Fighting for the throne? Is the throne of the Yin Kingdom more attractive than the Haut Yin Great Way?" Priest Moli sincerely suggested, "But the throne should originally belong to you, Prince. It is mine, and it will always be mine." Prince Longqing recalled the illusions he had seen on the back of the mountain of the academy, especially the great light and great fear he had seen in the last few steps on the edge of the cliff. His face was slightly pale, and then he resolutely said, Anyone who wants to take away my things will die. He withdrew his hand from the window and did not know when there was a pink peach blossom between his fingers. He casually inserted the peach blossom on his lapel, wondering if there was a transparent hole under the petals that were full of vitality. Prince Longqing looked at the smoke from the houses outside the window and the rape flowers in the fields. After a long silence, he calmly smiled and said, "In a few years, I will pull down all these ugly Tang's houses and eradicate all the rape flowers in the fields. Then I will burn them all. I will burn away the evil and filth, and burn away a holy and bright world." The horse carriage stopped by the meadow outside the academy as usual. Ningke got off the carriage and found that the atmosphere in the academy today was very different from before. There were still many students standing in the distance, looking at him and discussing. However, the disdain and disgust in their eyes had long been replaced by shock, envy, and a touch of regret. Under these gazes, Ningke walked into the academy and nodded slightly to Chang Zhengming, who was beside the stone steps. Then he saw a little attendant standing in the morning light and waving to him. He could not help but be slightly startled. The little attendant had delicate features, and his little face was very tender, as if it was made of pink and jade. He looked at Ningke walking toward him, and then he very respectfully bowed and said, "Young master, I am the attendant of my young master. I have been ordered to bring you up the mountain." The little attendant had to put on the airs of an old master. Ningke could not help but laugh and asked, "The question is, who is your young master? And why do you call me young master?" The little attendant chuckled and touched his head. He explained, "My young master is the second son, and the way I address him is the rules set by my young master. You are the youngest one in the back mountain, so I have to call you young master." Ningke asked with great interest, "Then which Mr. Chun Pippi is?" The little attendant answered in a childish voice, "He used to be young master. Now that you are young master, he is Mr. 12. Ningke was startled, and then he shook his head and said with a smile, "That fat man and young master, it sounded a little strange." The little attendant said seriously, "Actually, I think so too." The path that Ningke took to enter the back mountain of the academy today was certainly not the one that had tormented him half to death. The little attendant took him to a secluded alley and went up from a stone path beside the old library. Then they stopped in front of the thick fog that covered the mountain. "Young master, there's also a path on the second floor of the old library. But young master said that today is your first day here, so please go this way." Ningke looked at the fog in front of him and subconsciously thought of the fog on the long mountain path the day before yesterday. His body slightly stiffened. After a moment of silence, he looked at the little attendant and asked gently, "Is there anything strange in the fog?" The little attendant laughed and said, "Of course not. I often walk." There was indeed nothing strange in this mountain fog, such as the bamboo leaves that turned into flying swords, the mountain springs that turned into waterfalls, and the small ponds that turned into seas. This mountain fog was very strange. Ningke walked only a dozen steps and actually walked to the mountainside of the academy's back mountain. He waved his sleeves and brushed away the last few wisps of fog in front of him. He could not help but be stunned by the mountainside scenery in front of him, which was like a fairyland under the morning light. Looking from the direction of the academy, there was actually such a large flat cliff facing the east side of the steep mountain. On the cliff plateau, there was a mirror-like lake, blooming wildflowers, tranquil grass, and towering ancient trees. There were thousands of kinds of flowers, including peach blossoms, but they were inconspicuous among them. Under the towering ancient trees, there were more than 10 simple houses, with smoke curling up from the chimneys. Behind the houses, there was a silver line pouring down from the cliff. It was actually a waterfall in the far distance. A flock of blackbirds were chirping and flying between the cliff and the waterfall. In the morning light, such a beautiful scene came into his eyes. Ningke was stunned and did not know what to say. Feeling the quiet chi of heaven and earth and the smell of life in the back mountain, a strong thought came into his mind. No matter who wants to destroy such beauty, I will definitely destroy you first. Modified 201112110408. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 167. When I came here for the first time, I was shocked by the beauty of this place, just like you. Chun Pippi stood beside Ning Kei without anyone noticing. Ning Kei turned to look at him and asked, "Is it more beautiful than the place where you used to live?" Chun Pippi looked at him and wondered if he had guessed his origin. After a moment of silence, he said, "Solemn, solemn, or sacred. In fact, they are not beautiful." He smiled and continued, "Welcome to the Real Academy." Ning Kei replied with a smile, "It seems that you're my tour guide today." Chun Pippi had never heard of the word tour guide, but he could guess what it meant. He smiled and led him to the cliff platform. They walked through the green fields and meadows, stepped on the slightly wet ridges, and walked on a wooden bridge. Then they came to the lake as calm as a mirror. The white water birds in the lake sometimes floated and sometimes sank, hunting for small fish in the water. Whether they succeeded or failed, they proudly raised their heads, swallowed the fish, or shook off the water drops on their feathers. The footsteps on the wooden bridge attracted the attention of the water birds, but they were obviously not afraid of people. Instead, they seemed to be curious and very intelligent. There was a pavilion in the middle of the wooden bridge, and it was very quiet among the lake and water. A woman in a light yellow spring dress of the academy was concentrating on embroidery in the pavilion. Chun Pippi led Ning Kei to the woman and bowed respectfully, "Seventh sister." The woman in light yellow raised her head and glanced at Ning Kei beside him. She said with a smile, "Show youngest brother around." Ning Kei bowed with hands folded in front and said respectfully, "Seventh sister." Seventh sister glanced at Chun Pippi with a faint smile and suddenly said, "From now on, you could be lazy." Chun Pippi smiled awkwardly. Ning Kei did not understand and looked at the two blankly. Seventh sister did not say anything and continued to embroider. After walking out of the pavilion and crossing the lake to the shore along the wooden bridge, Chun Pippi looked back and introduced Ning Kei. Seventh sister is Mu Yu, an expert in tactical arrays. The fog you passed through when you went up the mountain was set up by the predecessors of the academy. Now she's responsible for the maintenance of the tactical array. As for embroidery, Seventh sister encountered a bottleneck 2 years ago, and neither eldest brother nor second brother could find a good way. Finally, the headmaster decided to let her embroider. She has been embroidering for 2 years, and I don't know if she has passed the bottleneck. Ning Kei was still shocked in his heart, but he kept calm on the surface. This was the first time he entered the second floor of the academy, and he had no idea about many things. For example, what was the relationship between embroidery and tactical arrays? But because he had no idea at all, he knew that even if he asked, it would be useless, so he remained silent. Chun Pippi led him past the extremely tall ancient tree and walked to the dense forest in the west. Listening to the melodious sound of zither and flute, he said, "The one who plays the flute is 9th brother Baigong Weiyong, and the one who plays the zither is 10th brother Shimanbua. They come from the southernmost island and are proficient in temperament. As for what method they are cultivating, I'm afraid that even they themselves don't know." Ning Kei asked in surprise, "What do you mean? How can a cultivator not know his own method of cultivation?" Chun Pippi shook his head and explained, "The headmaster never assigns them homework, but just lets them play these useless things freely. I have been listening to them play for many years in the academy, and I have never seen them do anything else." The sound of zither and flute in the spring forest suddenly stopped, and then there was a rustling sound. 2 men walked out of the forest. The 2 men were handsome and calm, wearing the white academy spring clothes, which had obviously been modified. The sleeves and hem of the robe were very wide, and when the spring wind blew, they looked like immortals. They did not look like students, but more like sage-like hermits. 9th brother, who was holding the flute, looked at Chun Pippi and said angrily, "What do you mean by even I myself don't know?" Chun Pippi said with a smile, "Then tell me, what on earth have you been cultivating in the academy for so many years?" 9th brother picked up the flute and hit Chun Pippi's head hard without hesitation. Chun Pippi covered his head and shouted angrily, "Ninth brother, how can you hit me when you can't win an argument? What happened to your elegant demeanor?" The man who had been silent beside, holding the zither, suddenly said, "Good hit." Chun Pippi looked at the man and said, "Tenth brother, you have never been such a person." Tenth brother Shimon Buhwa smiled and gently held the zither in his hands in front of him. His fingertips slightly trembled and plucked out a broken sound. He looked at Ninkei and said, "Youngest brother, senior brother Bagong, and I are cultivating the great way of music. A layman like Pippi, who only knows how to fight with the chi of heaven and earth, can never understand the beauty of music. I hope you're not such a layman." Ninth brother Bagong Weiyong put the flute in his waist and looked at Ninkei with great interest and said, "Youngest brother, when I saw you climbing the mountain that day, you were quite free and easy. Master Yensei also said that you have the potential of a divine talisman master, and I heard that you are a famous calligrapher in Chong and recently. In this case, you must have some attainments in art. You and I should have a good competition in the future." Ninkei hurriedly bowed respectfully, but he thought bitterly in his heart that he did not know anything about music. As for whether it was vulgar or not, being able to perceive the chi of heaven and earth should, of course, be used to improve one's state and then learn fighting skills. These two senior brothers actually put all their cultivation and lives into music. It was elegant, but it was a waste of God's gift. "Senior brothers, I don't know anything about the way of music," he hurriedly replied. Ninth brother Bagong Weiyong did not take it seriously. He waved his sleeves and said, "Music and calligraphy are beautiful things in heaven and earth. The word art stresses on understanding by analogy. You didn't have a chance in the past, but now you have met me and your 10th brother. How can you know nothing about it?" Seeing their enthusiasm, Ninkei was too embarrassed to refuse. So he promised that in the future, when he was free from studying in the academy, he would respectfully ask these two senior brothers for advice on the way of music. Even if he could not learn anything, it would be good to be an audience. Hearing this, the two senior brothers showed joy on their faces and praised together, "You are indeed not a layman like Pippi." On the way to the house on the cliff plateau under the big tree, Chun Pippi glanced at Ninkei and asked seriously, "Do you really like to listen to the sound of flute and zither?" Ninkei glanced at him and said, "Not at all. You don't have to look at me like this. This is my first day in the second floor of the academy. How can I refuse two senior brothers who are so enthusiastic?" Chun Pippi said bitterly, "You idiot. Of course you should firmly refuse this kind of thing." Ninkei did not understand and asked, "If senior brothers want to play flute for me in the future, I can just avoid it. What's the problem?" These years, no senior brother or senior sister is willing to quietly listen to their performance. They can only face each other and play flute and zither every day. One is happy, the other is sad. They flatter each other and are already bored to the extreme. What they lack is an audience. Since you have promised them, you can wait to be dragged to the back mountain every day to be an audience. Ninkei asked confusedly, "Are you two senior brothers very poor in the way of music? If you two senior brothers were in the world, you would definitely be the first-class rhythmic masters." Chun Pippi said with a straight face. Soon after, his eyebrows drooped down bitterly as he continued, "But no matter how amazing a musician is, if you listen to the same song over and over again for 1,000 times, you will know the pain within. Would he get tired of eating 1,000 bowls of hot and sour noodle slices? Would Sang Sang get tired of eating 1,000 bowls of cabbage heads and vinegar? Would he get tired of taking Sang Sang to the building of pines and cranes to eat 1,000 bowls of noodles in a row? Of course he would get tired of listening to the same song for 1,000 times in a row, and it would be very painful." Ninkei asked with a trembling voice, "There are countless people in the world who love Rhythmic Master. I think you two senior brothers won't let me listen to it alone. There are many people in the world who love Rhythmic Master, but in your opinion, there are very few people who are qualified to listen to their music. Those who can enter the back mountain of the academy and become their classmates have all passed the test of the headmaster of the academy. Of course they are qualified, but others are not. After a long silence, Ning Ke said resolutely, I will avoid it. I used to avoid it. Chen Pippi looked at him sympathetically and sighed. The back mountain of the academy is not small, but it is still possible to find someone. When Ning Ke was about to say something, he suddenly found that the flowering tree beside the stone path was shaking. A person whose face could not be seen clearly suddenly rushed out, which startled him. When he looked closely, he found that it was a young senior brother whom he met on the top of the mountain that day. But today, this senior brother's hair and clothes were all covered with all kinds of flower petals, which looked very funny and a little scary. Chun Pippi pulled him to his side and introduced him very seriously. This is 11th brother, Wang Qi. Ning Ke hurriedly tidied up his clothes and bowed deeply. Greetings, 11th brother. 11th brother stared at him and did not return the bow. Instead, he picked up a petal on his shoulder and asked blankly, Let me ask you, if there is nothing outside your heart and nothing outside your heart, but before the headmaster of the academy entered the back mountain, this flower has bloomed and withered in the mountain for thousands of years. What does it have to do with our hearts? If no one enters the back mountain, if no one sees this flower does not exist? Ning Ke was speechless. After a long silence, he turned his head and looked at Chun Pippi innocently. Chun Pippi's gaze was even more innocent than his, which meant that if Ning Ke could not answer clearly, it would not be good for him to leave. 11th brother Wang Qi looked at him tenderly and waited for a long time without an answer. But he did not show any displeasure on his face. He explained himself gently. In my opinion, before you and I see this flower, the flower and our hearts are silent. When you and I come to see this flower, the flower appears and blooms in our hearts. Whether this flower exists or not depends on the moment when it appears. Ning Ke slightly opened his mouth, still speechless, and looked very innocent. Chun Pippi felt a little guilty because of this guy's innocent look. He coughed twice and said, 11th brother, it is the first day that youngest brother entered the back mountain. I have to take him to meet other senior brothers. Can we talk about the flower's heart later? Wang Qi looked at Ning Ke warmly and said, Youngest brother, if you have spare time in the future, can you help me to think about it? Ning Ke heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly agreed. Then he followed Chun Pippi and ran away from the flowering trees towards the houses under the ancient trees on the cliff plateau. He did not notice the sympathetic look on Chun Pippi's face. I haven't recovered yet. I feel like vomiting while writing. It seemed that I lack pressure. Well, I can put more pressure on myself. I will guarantee 6,000 words tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.